Rock 30, Bill and Jay's excellent podcast, with your hosts, Jay Odom and Billy Quinton. Our guests this evening are Jimmy and Hava McClintock. Let's roll.
All right, we are excited for podcast number 28, season 2, episode 6. I'm Billy Quinton.
I am Jay Odom.
And we are very excited to have some special guests here today. Let me just preview it by saying we're going to solve the Middle East crisis before this podcast is over. That's how important this podcast is
These
right
guests
now.
that we have today can make this happen.
It's done. It's done. We got two Gentiles here going to throw in their dumb questions.
Right.
But Jay, go ahead and introduce who our guests are.
Well, tonight we have got Jimmy and Hava McClintock, both Rockwall natives, been here a very long time. So I've got a little bit about you, Hava. You were born and raised in Israel. Mm-hmm. Jimmy, you were born in Texas.
Yes.
So just a little bit of distance there.
Yeah, that's right. But the next best thing.
That's right. If it's not Israel,
Yeah.
And so over the last several years, you've lived in both Israel and Texas. Mm-hmm. So would you say both are homes?
Yes,
Both are
absolutely.
Home. Okay. Mm-hmm. Y'all were early pioneers working with individuals and ministry leaders, helping them understand the importance of building relationships between our two communities, the Christian and the Jews, during a time when Israel was not a topic of interest among Christians, which is something we're really going to dive into and talk about that. Jimmy, you hold a Bachelor of Arts in Ancient History with an emphasis in early Rabbinic Judaism.
That's the same as I had. That's what I did.
Did you study Rabbinic Judaism?
At Texas State. That's what I did.
Well,
weird. We'll talk later.
No, on the air. We'll hear your thoughts.
We'll compare notes.
What is your thoughts on Rabbinic Judaism?
You know what? Let's wait till the podcast gets rolling, Jay. Don't rush me.
And that was in New York?
It was, well, actually, I started, I had been in college. I was a junior in college here. And when I turned 20 years old, I moved to Israel in 1972.
And you guys met in 73 in Israel.
When did I say I moved? In 72?
73.
No, I moved in 73, a week
73.
after I turned 20.
You better get these dates right, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's right. And I started working, of course, I stopped going to college then, but I started a few years later with the New York SUNY system had a office in Jerusalem, where they offered an extension of the university, and so I started with the SUNY system there, and I graduated from that program.
You said you were going to college here first?
Yes.
Where at here?
My first semester was in Central State, but then I came to Dallas Baptist because my major was a Bible major, biblical studies. And so having
year was
grown
that?
up in Dallas, that was...
My son just graduated from Dallas Baptist. So
Oh,
we
did he?
love that
Okay.
place. Yeah.
That's right.
And now I do want to, you know me, and when I get backgrounds on people, I want to quiz them about their colleges.
You will find out things you did not know about yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
You went to Empire State University.
Yes.
Now, you took class. Did you not go to the one in New York? You said you took it?
This is the great thing about that program. They had an extension in Israel, and what you did was when you were accepted into the program, you helped develop your own course of study. So there was nobody else studying my subject.
Oh, wow.
And so every class...
Well, other than me when I was studying it
that's
in
right,
college.
that's
Yeah.
right.
But go ahead.
But every class, I had a professor, a bona fide professor at Hebrew University or one of the other universities in Israel, or a rabbi or someone who had credentials, and it was me and him. That was the class.
That's great.
So it was a great education.
Okay. See, I had a lot of stuff on Empire State, but it's the New York one. But I did learn this. This is very interesting. Okay. They just adopted their first mascot. Did you know y'all have a mascot?
No, I never been there.
Okay.
And what are they?
They're the Bluebirds.
The Bluebirds.
Of all the
my
mascots.
wife would love that.
Yeah, they're the Bluebirds. They have a mascot called Blue the Bluebird. That's going to strike fear into your opponents right there. We got to go against the Bluebirds, boys. So
I don't know if they have any sports teams.
that's what I was wondering. That's probably why you're the Bluebirds.
Yeah,
maybe bird watching is the main sport.
And now, Jimmy, you're an entrepreneur.
Yes.
A businessman.
Yes.
You've done several startups.
Yes.
Real estate investments,
Yes.
Developments, a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
Furniture, right?
Our furniture was the first thing I did. I think I was 23. 23, and in 75-ish, it was a different world, and so people had different tastes and different things, and kind of country furniture was kind of popular. Mm-hmm. And so I had a friend that he said, man, I am great with working with my hands, and went to wood shop, and I had saved a little money, and so we decided to go in the furniture business. And you know what? It worked. And so thank God I've never had something that didn't work.
That's great.
So I'm very happy about it.
Yeah.
So we've done real estate, furniture. We've been in the precious metals business. I've done some direct sales. I don't consider myself a salesperson, but I've done direct sales, and we just love it. We have a nutritional supplement company we've had for 30 years that my son runs, and so we've just done a lot of things.
That is the whole spectrum of stuff.
Yes.
My goodness.
That's right.
And so now you have. I think me and Billy can relate to your upbringing here in Texas.
Yeah, right.
I have no idea what it must have been like
growing in Israel.
Yeah, I picture you with a fiddle on a roof growing up.
I am the Hava and the fiddler on the roof.
Okay, there you go. That's all I see right now. Okay.
So explain to us who have never even been to Israel. Have you been to Israel?
No.
No. I would love to go. But tell us.
I got a wife that won't go to
we can
Garland.
arrange that. We can arrange
Okay. I would love to.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're going to take
Hey,
this
we'll
on the
do a
road.
Rockwall tour.
Okay.
We'll just
I
get
love
everybody from Rockwall.
Israel will not be the same getting a bunch of Rockwall people there.
So you grew up in what years your formative years in Israel? What decades was that? If you want to give that information.
No, I don't really want to go there.
Jay's getting real personal.
Let me put it this way.
It's important.
So I was born and raised in Israel.
Okay.
And my father and my mother are originally from Bulgaria. They're both Holocaust survivors. Mm. And 1945, my dad decided that it's time to move to Israel. And so when they moved to Israel, they purchased a home in Jerusalem. And my father bought just an amazing building in Jerusalem. I mean, it faced the old Jerusalem. I mean, it was right there in front of you. Anyway, but back then, the house that he purchased, the back wall of the house was the border between Jerusalem and Jordan.
Wow.
And so the home was right here where a lot of Bulgarian people from Bulgaria moved to Israel back then. You know, there was a big move of Bulgarian Jews. And so my life was, when we were living in Jerusalem, to cross the street, we literally had to crawl on the road because there were snipers on the side of Jordan. And they would shoot at us, try to kill us. And so you just had to crawl to get to the other side of the building.
Do you ever get
Holy
any
cow.
sense of normalcy, or is every time sheer terror? Or is it a point where you're like, this is my life?
Yeah, this is life in Israel. This is life in Israel. There was a period of time when there was like peace and quiet and, but go through history from 48 when Israel became a nation. It's been life,
Oh,
And
my goodness.
And
so,
that was before Israel became a nation.
before Israel became a nation.
So it was when all the turmoil there was a League of Nations that became the UN, and the whole thing of Zionism and the pan-Arab countries, and it was just a quagmire of difficulties, the same that we see today.
Still continuing in many ways.
Yeah.
But, as far as the Jewish people, y'all were so numerous, but you had no country. Like you had no real like this is home because until 1948, right? Yeah, and then when the United Nations decided, okay, this is going to be yours, and it was well received. Everybody was it was not well received, and so we still have the battle.
They didn't know whether to take you seriously.
I know. They're like, does this guy know at all what's happening? But yeah, so I can't imagine. I mean,
it is unimaginable. So that was your life for how long?
For a while. So when that happened, our neighbor, which was a close friend of my father from Bulgaria, got shot by a sniper, killed him on the spot. And so my dad decided, you know what, it's time to move on. So he sold the property in Jerusalem and we moved to Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv was great, I had a great upbringing and went to school. I'm a draftsman in my profession.
Did you study English at that time?
Well, yeah, you learn 4 languages in Israel. So you have your Hebrew, you start with Hebrew, then you study Arabic, French, and English.
Wow.
And so those are the languages because most Arabic, you have to, be with the people. French was important, of course. English was like a international language, so everybody had to. It's kind of cute that we're talking about languages, and you walk in Jerusalem, you walk in the street and suddenly you hear this language and you hear that, and I'm thinking, oh, this is Russian, oh, this is Belgium, oh, this is Yugoslavia,
So you could differentiate.
Yeah, I can,
Wow.
And
because for us it would sound the same. Yeah. Well, and then you think about Jerusalem too. I would imagine
it's international,
right? I mean, the 3 main, you got Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim or Islam. All of them are centralized in Jerusalem, and so that's always the battle. There's always been the tearing down and the building up and the attacking each other, and so I'm assuming obviously going to Tel Aviv was a lot more peaceful.
And just life went on. I finished school in Israel and had an interesting life because the direction that my father took, if I may just go a little bit back.
Yes, absolutely.
So when my father moved to Israel, the Bulgarian Christian people were very, very nice to the Jewish people. And so when they moved to Israel, he had this vision that he said, we need to make sure that this continues with the world, because even back then the world hated the Jews. I mean,
did you feel that even as a child?
No, I never felt that. I never felt that. It was very interesting, and I'll tell you maybe a little bit later what I mean. But so when they moved to Israel, and my father decided he has a mission in life, and so what he decided to do is he said, I need to reach out to the Christian community and explain to them how urgent it is that they stay connected with the Jewish people. The Jewish people, the state of Israel. And so he, it's a God thing. He met a gentleman in Jerusalem, and I'm not sure what meeting that was, but my dad was talking about his experience in his life, in the concentration camp and all that he has gone through. And he asked my dad, would you be interested in coming to America and maybe share your testimony? And my dad said, of course, So we thought it was just going to be my dad. Well, it was my mother and my brother and my father and myself.
Mm-hmm. And so you're going to America.
So we're going to America.
How old are you at this point?
18.
Okay.
I was 18.
And what are you expected to see? What's in your head? What do you?
You know what? Just the thought of America was huge, because we all watched the movies, Ben-Hur and and you can only imagine America was just like almost going to heaven. We're going to the promised land, But anyway, so they have got a house for us in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was our spot. And then they gave us a chauffeur, and we traveled 38 states for a year. And my dad went to different congregations and gatherings and told his story.
So he would go to churches and stuff like that?
He would go to churches, he would go to universities, anyone that would open.
Now, did it feel like the promised land there in Chattanooga?
You know what? Not exactly the promised land, but I have to say the people were so gracious, and they were amazing. And I have to say this. All my experience since I came to America when I turned 18, it was just unbelievable. I mean, people treated us like royalty. We were loved, we were taken care of, and so we traveled for a year, and then when we came back, my dad decided it's time to go back to Israel, and so my brother and I decided to stay. Said, you know what? Let's see what happens. So my parents went back to Israel, and there was really a terrific family that said, you know what? Come move in with us.
How old were you?
I was 19 right then. And so my brother and I moved. It was in Houston, actually. So we got jobs. I got a job as a draftsman. My brother is a bodybuilder, so he was one of the, the Hercules.
Oh, wow.
That was his job?
Yeah, so he's
a
a bodybuilder.
He used to do that.
He was offered a position. It used to call the ambassador.
President.
The president's health club.
Okay.
And he started in Houston, so they liked him so much that they said, "Listen, you're just too good to stay here in Houston. We have a bigger club in Dallas. We want you to move to Dallas." So he moved to Dallas as a deccan. We all moved after him because we wanted. We're in the Jewish faith. We're all connected. Family is everything. Mm-hmm. So anyway, after 2 years, I was in America, and then I decided it's time to go home. It's just I did not connect. I just did not connect.
Connect with
the culture.
Mm-hmm. It was not home.
It was not home, and so I moved back to Israel. 2 years later, Jimmy shows up. But going back to the vision that my dad had, to him it was so important to reach out to the Christian community and urge them to connect with the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. When it was time for my father, he was done with his part. He says, I'm tired. So this is where we decided we're gonna pick up the vision, and this is what we're doing today.
So Jimmy, I saw a podcast earlier, you were at a point that you were obviously not raised Jewish. Mm-hmm. In fact, you were talking earlier, you went to Dallas Baptist for a little bit. Were you raised as a Christian, or were you just raised non? No,
I had a great family, a great life. I grew up I was born in the early 50s and teenager in the 60s, and so all you younger guys won't know what that means, but it was a strange time in the world, and I was, for some reason, a little rebellious, so I left home at 14.
Kind of coming out of those idealistic 50s, the
yes.
1950s.
And the 60s went idyllic in a different way,
right.
Psychedelic or something like that. Yeah. But
everything was good.
Everything was good.
Fine. Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with any religious background, so which actually turned out in my position or my reflection, it was the best thing.
But that's very rare, especially I would think in the '60s. Like, did you consider yourself an atheist?
No. Religion, as an American, a Texan, everywhere you went, there was a Bible. There was on the coffee tables. I don't know. We may even had one in our house. I mean, just because it was like a family Bible kind of thing. But it was not. We were not religious.
But you believed in God and being a good person.
We never thought about it. I mean, nobody. It was not a
crazy
topic of conversation. You don't talk about. Well, what about God?
So, what town did you grow up in? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Fort Worth, but when I was a baby, my parents moved to Dallas. So my very early childhood was in the Dallas area. We moved around the mid cities. We were in the country south of Grand Prairie some, but the main years from the third or fourth grade to the 10th grade, when I quit high school, I lived in Arlington.
Okay.
And then after that, I did my independence and ended up a few years later in Israel.
You said that you were looking for something, right? Like you just felt like there was something missing or you needed something.
Yeah, I've always been very independent-minded and curious. And so, you were taught back then you work hard. I was from the strata of the society that you go to school, you get a job, you get married, and you work hard and you live your life, and someday you'll retire, and that's it. It wasn't exactly the way it happened for me, but right before I became 18, I had my first religious experience, I'll say. And
what was that experience?
The man, I was actually had lost my job. I had gotten in a little bit of trouble and ended up with a friend to get out of town. You realize that if you stay around the people that got you in trouble, you're going to get in trouble again. So I had enough smarts
Anytime
to say,
the term had to get out of town is used, there's trouble.
Yeah, there's trouble. Well, then that was really the case. But I was already found in trouble. But I ended up in Midland, Texas, with a friend. He had a sister live there.
Good old Midland.
Yeah.
A lot going on there.
Yeah. So
Heart of the Jewish community.
Yeah. We weren't there long. I got a job at Midland was still is a very wealthy community.
Yeah.
Got a job, and I found out something about my boss that was very curious because I was pretty naive. I lived in an area that you didn't meet a lot of different kind of people. I mean, all the neighbors and everybody within miles were all the same kind of people. So I found that something. So the next morning I went to work and said, man, I didn't know you were whatever it was. And he just decided to fire me, so. So when he fired me, I got back home and told the sister, I said, well, I just lost my job. She said, well, if you don't have a job, you can't stay here. Get your bag and you're out. So it was April, kind of cool, and got out on the road. And, till today, I don't have a clue where I thought I was going. I don't know if I was coming. I don't know if I was coming back or going or where I was. But anyway, a Mercedes stopped and put, about 100 yards in front. And I'm guessing I had seen a Mercedes in my life, maybe, but I'd certainly never been in one. So I kind of ran up there and got in, and of course, I thought it was pretty nice. But the first question he asked me, he said, "How's your relationship with God?"
Just right off the bat.
Yeah, and I didn't, it didn't shock me. I just said, I don't have one. And he asked, "Well, would you like to?" And I said, "Well, why not? I mean."
Can't hurt.
What can go wrong? Yeah. I'm not in a position to argue about, I'm not a good choice
if
maker.
God gives you these Mercedes, I'm on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of had my start. But at that moment, I realized one thing. You know what? I had a real internal experience. Outside, I don't know how anybody felt about it, but internally, I said, you know what? I'm going to pursue this.
Just from that conversation?
Well, I'll tell you how strange it was. We were driving now by this time down the road, and back in that days they had revivals or different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a
Tent
big
revival.
banner over the road saying Evangelist Richard Hogue is going to be at the Midland High School football stadium. And I told him, I said, you know what? I'd like to meet that guy. I didn't say anything. But within a few minutes, he pulled into a hotel parking lot, got out of the car, went back and brought out Richard Hogue. So the story is the guy was a pastor. So he went out, Richard Hogue came out and kind of explained to me, as any good evangelist would, you know,
In a Mercedes.
what he thought was a good course of action for me. And when he said it, you know, I had had enough experience. You know, I mean, 14 is pretty young, but back then you already mature, because I'd been working. I'd been paying Social Security since I was 12 years old.
You were on your own.
Yeah, I mean, working was a normal, even in school, you just worked. So when that happened, I said, you know what? The only thing that I said is I'm totally ignorant of the subject, and that's all I care about knowing about. I mean, this was a life changer, physically, mentally, spiritually. And within a course of a couple of months, I got approached by a lady saying, another lady, very wealthy philanthropist, has sent me to tell you that if you'd like, she will send you back to school. And you can go to school as long as you want, as much as you want, and she'll pay for everything.
Holy cow.
Food, school, tuition, everything. And she had done that for others. She had built wings, and she built a wing on Dallas Baptist College for the nursing school. So that's how I got introduced to Dallas Baptist. She sent me down there, and the president was kind, spent the whole day with me, but he said, you know, you can't come here because you didn't graduate high school.
Right.
So I said, well, okay, I'll see you when I see you. So she sent me to San Marcos Military Academy, which was also good for me. The discipline helped. And without anybody knowing, I went and got a GED, because I said to myself, I'm already 18, and these guys are, 16. Mm-hmm. I'd already seen a lot of the world that I thought they hadn't seen, but you'd be amazed at what wealthy young people have experienced because they have money to do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I got to my GED, and without telling anybody, I enrolled at Central State University. I had a friend that I'd met to become a believer, and his parents said, well, listen, he's graduating. Go up there and stay with him. You don't have to pay for anything. I got up there, and they said, I went to register, and they said, well, you can't register here because you have to be graduated from high school. Well, the same story. I kind of knew it. I didn't pay attention that it might be everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I finally had to cave in and call the pastor that had picked me up, and I told him the story. I said, I'm up here at Central State University, and they're not letting me in, and I've got a GED. I'm not going back to San Marcos. He said, well, just wait. I'll call you in a minute. So in a couple of minutes, somebody from the administration's office came out and called my name and said, the president wants to see you. So I went in, and to try to make it short, I know we're a lot of ground to cover, but he told me, he said, Jimmy, it's against the rules to let a non-high school graduate go to a university. He said, but I'm going to make an exception. And that's been the story of my life. These kind of events have been literally the story of my life from that time. And that's why when people ask me the question, why do you believe in God? I said, listen, I cannot believe in God. If you have had the experiences I've had in life with the things that have happened to me that I can attribute to nothing else except the mercy and the kindness and the generosity of God, I can't do anything but believe. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's been my life. And Hava was telling the story. Well, when I was in college at Dallas Baptist, I went there the next semester. within I was there a year and a half. I was going into my junior year, and they said there's going to be a speaker somewhere. I don't remember exactly, but it's a Jewish man going to tell about his experience in life and that. So I went, and I didn't know it, and I didn't even know it till I got to Israel, but it was Hava's father.
Oh, wow. Okay, wow.
So
somebody is guiding your life. Like.
So I heard him, and then I got, it wasn't long, and that ants in the pants business I wrote him and said, could I come to Israel and meet you and help you, whatever. So I told everybody I'm going to Israel.
So this man shows up, Hava. And what happens?
Don't get too personal.
Tell what you want to tell.
Jay's already digging deep, so
that's right. We're going to get the scoop,
So it was a Friday, and Friday, Shabbat, everything closes at 12 o'clock. You don't hear cars. They close the shops. So he comes on Friday, and
of course I don't know any of that.
Right.
Yes.
I just happened to buy a ticket that landed me in the Friday afternoon.
Why is everything closed? I just got a sandwich.
And especially if you're flying into Israel, why are they scheduling flights when you can't do anything? You'd think they would just cut it off at 5.
So my dad welcomed him to our home, and he has, met my mom. I don't know if Isaac was not there.
No, Isaac
and
was
I
there.
was introduced to him, and so we all had a beautiful Shabbat dinner. And my dad kind of took him under his wing, We had like a little of everything in our backyard. We had a donkey and a horse and vegetables and fruit, every kind that you can think of. But he would take the horse, and we had a German Shepherd. My father really liked German Shepherds. So those were the things that. So he would take the horse to the fields, and he would invite Jimmy to go with him to the fields, and they would talk about Bible, the Torah, but I think this is a part when you can share.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that was it. But when I got there, I realized something, and I'm hoping the Christians listening, and let me just say this: when you say we're native Rockwallians, we kind of feel like it. When we moved here in '83, I think in the county there was 7,000 or something.
Right.
So it's pretty. We were out in the country. So we love this community. It's a great community. Great support. They've all been very supportive. But to go back to that, when he began teaching, every day we'd study. Every night we would study. On the Sabbath, on Saturday, we'd study all day, go for walks and this. And it was very apparent immediately. I said, I've been a Bible major. That's what I've studied. I've studied New Testament, Old Testament, Hebrew, Greek, everything. I said, but one thing that no professor ever told me, ever even mentioned existed, was that the world of the Bible, the culture of the Bible, exists today.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people, we were talking earlier about culture and religion and the difference and this and that. And the Jewish people, even though they can say we're not religious, but their whole structure, for 3,500 years, the culture of the Jewish people has pulled straight out from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they don't do it religiously, but it's who they are. You can't separate it.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's some that say, well, we're not religious, but you know what? They still celebrate the holidays, or they'll take off. They may not celebrate it, but they make sure that they're involved, because it's really the culture.
Well, wouldn't you say, like, growing up in Texas was the same thing as far as Christian? You weren't religious, but I'm sure you celebrated Christmas and did all those things, and
everybody wanted presents.
Yeah, everybody wants presents. You go to. I'm sure you went to the church buildings. You may not have gone to church, but the church buildings are used for meetings and all that stuff. And so I think it's the same thing that you're growing up in the culture, and and so you meet Hava, and you're looking for something, and Hava says, "What do you want to be persecuted and shot at? Because I got the thing for you. I know what we can do."
Yeah. No, I had what I tell people. The only best way to describe it is a Ruth experience. I said, listen, not being religious growing up, my advantage was I had no religious education.
Right.
There's a big difference between faith and religion. Completely two animals.
Agree.
Or two subjects. So having had an experience based on faith, I didn't have any of the other issues, baggage, or not. I don't want to say it. It's not a negative, but for me it was a very positive to not have any background, because when I got there I realized all I've been studying is the Bible, and that's all I cared about. And in Israel I found out that the Bible, the world of the Bible, the faith of the Bible, the places of the Bible, the history of the Bible all exist right here.
But let me ask you a question so I can kind of get this straight in my head, because me growing up Southern Baptist here in Texas, it is very much the way to heaven is through Christ.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make an assumption, when you were studying the Bible before you left for Israel, would you say you had a relationship with Christ?
Yes.
And then how has that changed?
Well, first of all, I've learned, and this may sound a little strange, but I've learned who he was. And if you read the New Testament, I mean, everybody says it. I don't know if they contemplate what it means, but everybody says, well, Jesus was a Jew. Yeah, he really was. And the New Testament describes him in different ways. But one is, during his whole life and even the after part, Jesus was looked at as a religious phenomenon. I mean, he was a man, but he was a chosen. He was special. He was anointed, like Moses or like Noah, like Abraham. They were put on this earth for a particular purpose.
So you didn't feel that you were changing beliefs. You were just learning more and adding.
Exactly. My belief, because I didn't know any Christian theology. I knew the Bible, but I didn't know the theological. Well, I knew some. I mean, you can't be in the Baptist college for 2 years, but I never studied it.
Well, and I will say this, as a lifelong Christian, one of our weaknesses as a Christian is I don't think growing up we teach our history, but definitely not the way the Jewish faith does. That we kind of, when we study the Bible, of course, the majority of it is New Testament. But when we do Old Testament, it never was and that's what started fascinating me on things was, okay, Passover, they're going to talk. Like, for instance, every Easter, I always remember this, every Easter, that Sunday, 10 Commandments is going to be on TV.
Loved it.
Yeah. But I remember as a kid going, why are they showing 10 Commandments?
I thought it was an Easter thing.
It's an Easter deal.
And I just recently realized.
Right. And so you're like.
Hey, better late than never.
Right.
I thought it was an Easter tradition.
I'm like, they have a golden opportunity here to show Jesus of Nazareth, and they're showing 10 Commandments again. Now, I love the 10 Commandments. It's greatness. Yul Brynner, I mean, my goodness. You can't beat that. Moses, and he would do all that stuff. But as a kid, I knew nothing about the Jewish people and the Jewish faith other than the 10 Commandments, Ben-Hur. You saw it in movies. They didn't, when we went to Sunday school or church, it wasn't taught like, okay, here's why the Jewish people did this. This is what led to this. Like we do that in history.
Right.
When we learn history, America, this happened, and then we had to do this, and this led to this. Well, we didn't do that and so there's so many Christians that don't know their background as much. And I'll tell you all this, when I was growing up, same thing. I didn't know a Jewish person until I got to college. So I go to college. This is how naive I was. So I go to college, and I'm thinking I'm a relatively smart guy. I mean, I went to Texas State. I mean, my goodness, they only accept people that are breathing. So anyway, I'm in the dorms. My first semester, we have Christmas break. And this guy that I've known all semester, Steve Weisberg, and he was great. And we're leaving. We're all saying goodbye. And I said, well, Steve, have a great Christmas. And Steve goes, well, I'm Jewish. Okay, great, but have a great Christmas. Because I'm like, oh, I don't care, but have a great Christmas. I hope Santa comes. It didn't enter my mind that meant something so much different.
I think we have that very similar, and so many people from this part of the country have that experience.
Yeah.
We just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we knew what happened. We knew the story. We knew about Christ being handed over to the Romans and all that stuff. But I always looked at it as, you had Caiaphas, who was the high priest then, and all that stuff, but it wasn't all the Jewish people that handed Christ over. It was these guys, this leadership that didn't want to give up their power. That this guy's coming in and he's fulfilling the prophecy. We can't have that because we get a lot of good stuff. So we got to kill him, and it's better to kill one guy than to have to deal with all this. So I never looked at it. My family, or a lot of people that I knew, never looked at it as. But then I've come to find out that there were so many people that blamed the complete Jewish people that they all got together and said, let's give Christ over. No, because there was tons of Jewish people that were becoming Christians, that were following Jesus too. But we were never taught that in that specific. I mean, other than we kind of knew it's these guys. It's like every group has your bad guys. I don't care who you are. Christians have the KKK. You have all these horrible things that can happen within a faith that take it too far, whatever. And so, but and that's where I want to go to is, I never knew why Jews were hated, growing up. You never really knew.
Right.
And you just knew they were. You knew about the Holocaust.
Or you would hear persecuted from the beginning of time.
Yeah. And that's crazy
If
to me.
I may just go back to, we're talking about education. Think about it. When we celebrate, when we have the holidays and Christmas comes up, what exactly do we see at Christmas time?
Well, we see Santa and all that stuff.
Who shows up in the middle of the night for the cookie and for the milk?
Right.
This is what we are educating our children. They have no clue.
No.
They have no clue
Well,
about
we
anything.
do it. Here's the thing, and even we did it to a degree. Of course, we taught our children about the birth of Christ and everything going on, but a majority of and we go to church and we do all this, and they know it. My kids know it and all that. They both went to, Cash went to Dallas Baptist, Berkeley's at Mary Hardin Baylor. They both went to Christian schools. But yeah, what other faith has a holiday? I don't think the Jewish people have, your what's it called, the Seder, Passover. You don't have okay, let's have a coyote as the mascot of Passover. You don't do that. It's like this is sacred, as opposed to. And the whole Christmas thing and the Easter thing and all that, it wasn't necessarily Christians that did it as much as, well, they're having a good time, let's throw some stuff. And then the Christians just accepted it. And then pretty soon you have this confusing, you're telling your kid about Jesus Christ, and you're also telling them about Santa. And it's just a weird world.
Yeah. Almost a disguising of the holiday itself. Is
that
what you're saying?
I think it was more of it'll be easier for them to understand this, because the whole premise of Santa was, obviously, he came from St. Nicholas, and he was a saint that gave to children and was a good man, but these kids aren't going to understand that. So let's make him Santa Claus, and he's going to give gifts, and he's good for everybody. But if you're bad, he's not going to get you a gift, so you got to be good. I think it was a watering down of and I think the Easter Bunny is the same way, which is not it's a great deal and stuff, but it's hard to raise kids.
This generation of the new generation that we know of, when we talk about any kind of religion or faith or traditions, when you are trying to make those children happy, how do you make them happy?
Right.
They want them happy, but education doesn't matter. We just want them happy.
Good point.
So there goes the eggs, the Easter eggs, and let's paint them.
And it was also a combination of everything coming together, too. There were others that wanted to celebrate Christmas, but they weren't Christian. So they started throwing theirs in, and everybody pretty soon just started meshing everything together, and that's what we end up with. But I agree 100% because I also think that, like, for instance, Easter is very hard to tell a child about. I mean, first of all, your children don't understand death when they're little, 3 and 4 years old. Now you got to tell them about him dying and crucified and being raised from the dead and all that. Yeah, it's a lot easier if we just kind of use this bunny as a metaphor or whatever. It's new life and all this kind of stuff. Which is still even weird that it's a bunny with eggs. That still was a problem.
I'm not even so sure if it's a metaphor, or doesn't that stem back to some pagan kind of thing?
Exactly. And I think the
Well,
pagans came
that's what history really teaches us. But as you know, history is not a important topic. It's not important, how do you say, discipline to study. Most people, they say, hey, I'm going to Google whatever I need to know. Don't teach me. I don't want to clog my mind up with history.
I only want to know what I want to know.
That's right. Yeah. And in this regard, and just not for any reason except to be factual, you hit it on it when around the 4th century, there was a dilemma. The dilemma was in the Roman world when the empire was declaring that it's going to be a Christian empire.
Right.
And everybody was pagan. So it was like on one good night, they went to all the pagan temples and tore down the sign on the door and slapped up a new sign saying, you worship this. Now tomorrow you're going to worship Christianity.
That's right.
And so we're not going to mess with the paganism so much. We're just going to give it a slant so that it'll be easy for them to just call themselves Christians. It's like being born into a family. I'm Christian because I was born into a Christian.
And I think you have a lot of Jewish people like that we talked about that earlier, where it's like, well, I don't really practice Judaism, but I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
And I think right, because Constantine was basically he became a Christian, just decided, okay, now everybody needs to be a Christian, and you're not supposed to convert people that way. You don't just change the title.
Well, they weren't converted.
No.
They just got a new label. They got a new label.
Now, so I want to go back to you.
Okay.
And Hava's father.
Yeah.
And how that went down with you asking for her hand in marriage.
Well,
so I'm assuming you would be considered a Gentile.
Yes.
Right? A Gentile. How was that taken, and how did that work?
Well, fortunately, he was a wise man, and he did not judge people.
Name?
Pardon?
What was his name?
Aaron Levy.
Aaron, that's a good Jewish name right there. Yeah.
So he didn't judge people by their skin color or by where they were born or that. It's what's important is what's in a man's heart. And so having been together for even a short time, when you live in somebody's home and when you spend all day, all night, together, you're eating all your meals, you're conversing, you get to know each other pretty quickly. And back in the 73, the world was a simpler place. We had movies. I don't know if we had a color TV, but only time you ever watched TV was on Friday night when they'd have a movie from Egypt, because Israel had no television, There was a new country. It was really a new country. And when I went over there, my mother made me a wonderful, and we still have it till today, a wonderful blanket kind of thing made out of denim. I had a friend that's brother weighed 300-something pounds. So I would get his jeans, which were like this wide if you undid the seams. And she made me a beautiful blanket with not felt, but whatever that is, something like felt on the inside.
A little bit like, is it Jacob?
Yeah, I didn't know if I was going to be I didn't know if I was going to be
I'm sure your friend, the 300-pound guy, feels good that he turned his jeans into a blanket.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure he's feeling good about himself.
Yeah, I don't think I ever told him about that. But
I want to mix in a salad. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were there, and of course we got to know each other. And when you're around people, if you're a spiritual person, you can pick up on a person's spirit. Sometimes you don't have to be a spiritual person. You can pick up on it.
And you don't know that's what you're doing.
You don't know it, but that's right. But what was really the catalyst is during the holidays, because I arrived there at the end of August. Within 3 weeks, the holidays were starting, which starts with Rosh Hashanah, which will be at the end of September this year. And then 10 days later was Yom Kippur. So in 1973, when Yom Kippur started, the 73 war, the Yom Kippur War started.
Yeah.
But in that time, Hava had met people in California and that, but there was a young Jewish man coming, and they had already talked about he was going to come and ask to marry her.
Hava, you had a lot of guys coming after you.
Yeah, so he's there. He comes.
Get in line, Jimmy.
Well, no, we never had. It was not a matter of I didn't go there, thinking about. Yeah. But when he came there, we'd go at night and we'd walk around, and Hava would be in front with him, and Hava's father and I would kind of be the chaperones in the back. But then he was going to go to Tel Aviv to visit family and friends, and so I thought to myself, I said, I'm here in Israel, and I don't plan to leave. I don't know a soul in Israel, and if Hava leaves, I'm going to have nobody. And so one day, as Hava said, we were out in we had orange orchards by the house. And we were sitting there, and I said, well, I'd like to ask you a question. He said, what is it? And I said, well, what would you think if I married Hava?
It's like Hava doesn't have a say in this whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, and wait for his response. His response was, this was October. His response of, we'll do it in a few months. And I told him, no. I said, I've never talked to Hava.
Well, he thought it was all set.
Oh, he was fine. But he said, from the very beginning, he told me, he said, Jimmy, he said, you have a Jewish soul.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel you had a Jewish soul?
I didn't even know what it meant. But now, after 52 years, I do. And of course, that was my choice. I said, like Ruth, I said, the Jewish people are going to be my people. Mm-hmm. Their God is going to be my God. Whoever they are, whatever they have to go through, I'm ready to do it with them. And so he did say yes, but I told him, I said, well, I've talked to her. So Hava's at home sick from work. She's got a bad cold. That night I went in there. That night I went in there, and I sat there. We're talking
more than a cold.
Yeah. When it was time for me to leave the room, I said, listen, I want to ask you something. I talked to your father today, and I asked him, what would he think if I married you? And I told him that he said yes, but I told him that we've never talked, so I wanted to ask you.
Thought maybe we would include you in the process.
Well, what do you think about it? And she said, well, I'm sick. I'm sitting here. I'm sick.
About this right now.
I've never thought about this, and so I'm gonna have to think about it.
And you're saying it's just a cold. She's like, it's the flu.
Yeah.
It's much worse than what you was. Yeah.
So the next night, same routine. Go out. Time she's still in bed sick. I went in and
I just want to add to this is we never dated.
That's what I'm saying.
We
It
never
doesn't sound
nothing.
like.
No, he was just a visitor. He was just a visitor there, and I was his
host.
Host.
Kind of a family.
Yeah, and
she was being kind.
And I was in my mind, the guy that came from California,
Right.
And then
she's like,
I keep telling him, Jimmy, I'm sick. I cannot think about that.
Yeah.
And
there's a guy out in the living room that's waiting on me.
No, he was in Tel Aviv.
He was in Tel Aviv.
Oh, he was in Tel Aviv.
But he was a good Jewish young man from a wealthy family in medical school. So it was kind of the traditional
Jewish
hit the jackpot.
Doctor.
You hit the jackpot.
But did you know this man?
I met him in California in one of my trips when I was living here. But
Because clearly you didn't need to have a relationship with the person that's going to marry you. Your dad pretty much decided everything.
well, I did have a say. But I tell you a real quick story that kind of, I wanted to see his personality, the gentleman that came. Because I didn't date him either. You know, we just met
So
for 2
you
weeks.
were still weighing options. It was,
You know, I just met him for 2 weeks when I was visiting California.
Wow.
So anyway, so when he came, I thought to myself, okay, so I'm meeting this guy and he wants to marry. And I need to know who he is, you know. So one of the days, we were sitting down, and usually we go out for a walk after dinner. And I told him, I said, instead of walking, let's play a game. They said, okay. So I said, let's play Monopoly. Everybody said, fine, you know. So I have everything on the table, and we start playing. I was awful in playing Monopoly every time I played. That night, I had everything. I had hotels, I had neighborhoods, and so we were playing, and he would land on my hotel. And I said, you owe me. So he takes them and he goes, here. And then he would land on my property every day. He was very upset, and I said, this is only Monopoly money.
Right.
This is not for me.
Well,
so the game of Monopoly saved you
But I'll
from having
say
a
this.
horrible...
I'll say this. That was a great idea, because Monopoly will show your true your true temperament. Because when the Quintons play down and dirty.
Yeah.
And there are like arguments, and there are you don't talk to each other for a couple of days. You know, you made a horrible deal. You knew I was going to get boardwalk. You know, I mean, you're still bitter about it. It shows your true.
And then you always have the person that feels sorry for the other person.
Right. Okay.
You don't have to pay me.
Right.
But it's a game. You have to win.
Yes. We're capitalist pigs.
Yeah.
You have to pay.
You don't let them pass.
Yes. So, that's
that is
funny.
how-
That's a
so-
great idea.
That was it.
That was my decision. I said, I cannot marry you. You know.
So Parker Brothers had a part in you making the decision. Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about my plan when that took place.
Where were you during the Monopoly game?
No, I was playing
He
too.
was-
Oh,
when-
how awkward is that? You're both
yeah.
guys are
Yeah, so she saw who he was, and she saw who I was.
Did he
So
know
when
you
he-
were in the mix?
No, I
No.
wasn't in the mix at that point. I didn't have any. I thought she was going to get married to
Jimmy's
him.
over there with just the light blues, not making much, you know.
No.
He's thinking, I don't have a shot now. Look at this terrible property I have.
Yeah. But anyway, when it was Jimmy's, when he would land on my property, he says, okay, well, how much do I owe you?
And you had no idea you were auditioning at that point.
No,
No.
Pretty much.
And
That's
I don't
great.
think she was thinking
That is
about that either. She
I was just checking him out
yeah,
just
the
to
other
see,
guy.
you know, 'cause
That is
like you
great.
said.
So on the second night, I go
let me
back in-
finish.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
I'm sorry.
Here we go.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We've been married 52 years.
Well,
We can understand that.
at the beginning, he was in charge. We now know who's in charge.
oh yeah. You were mistaken.
Yeah.
You were mistaken.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he comes the second night, and he comes with his nice clothes on. Usually, it's like when we go out to Tel Aviv or something, you know, you dress up. And I'm looking at him, says, "Are you going somewhere?" You know, and he said, "No, I came to visit. You know, I came to spend time with you." Well, I mean,
That dressing up was blue jeans with a T-shirt and a button short sleeve. shirt.
Right. Well, that's 73, though. That's dressed up then.
that
Yeah.
was.
So the second night when he comes and we're talking about his day and how it was everything, and I'm just coughing and I'm just not feeling good, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he's still here. So he gets up and he's leaving, and as he gets to the door, I told him, I said, listen. He said, have you been thinking about what I said last night? And I said, Jimmy,
Still
I'm
sick.
You know, I'm sick. I mean,
But were you, even though you were sick, You had things going through your head, of course, right? You were
No, not at all.
I mean, she just a minute ago said, he's still here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so you know it's not going through right now.
And so when he asked me, have you thought about it? And I said, no, Jimmy. I said, I'm still sick. And he says, well, how much longer?
I mean, I'm from Texas.
Jimmy,
Come on.
what medicine do you need? Tamiflu?
I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
simple
What do I
yes
need
or
to
no.
Yeah. Let's get the humidifier out. What are we doing here?
Is she still this way? If she's sick, no decision's going to be made?
So anyways,
I already know the answer.
So anyway, so I see him walking. He's walking out, and he gets to the door, and I'm looking at him, and I said, Jimmy, I said, I'll tell you what. If you promise me that you would love me and take care of me, I will marry you.
Wow.
And he said, I will.
Wow.
And
I
I
thought
said-
you were going to say, if you give me the green properties for the light blues, I'll marry you.
Do
No.
you to this day, do you play a game of Monopoly and not think about that?
I haven't played since then.
Really?
I don't think we have.
That is so great.
That is truly, that's crazy.
That's a great. We already know one of the clips we're going to play.
Hey, and if she ever tells me she wants to, I'm not going to play.
no,
Do not
you have
chance
no
it.
idea. There's way more on the line.
No, I'm
than
not
you
doing
know.
it. I'm
Yeah.
not going through that
Yes.
again.
Yes. Why is this other man here playing Monopoly with us, honey? What's going on?
And so fast forward, you're married in Israel.
Yeah.
We got
What is
married.
What was the Jewish wedding like? What is that like?
It was a Jewish wedding, and I spent every moment looking at her saying, what is the rabbi saying?
Did you have to learn?
Oh, yes, I was learning Hebrew, but in the streets. I wasn't in school. I'd gotten a job and was working, and so, just picking up the language.
But at
But
the
after-
ceremony,
Yeah, the ceremony was Jewish ceremony.
Do y'all do the chair thing and all that
No,
stuff?
no, there was no chair thing.
Oh,
But
okay.
he brought
It
the
was
glass.
right.
and-
It was right after the war,
Yeah.
and
And then also just before that is 72, where you have the Munich Olympic Games, where all that
that's
stuff
right,
happened
that's
too.
right.
That was
I
right.
wasn't there then, but that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
But after once we went out to our honeymoon, and we're sitting in a restaurant, and he likes to go order, whatever we're gonna. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, who did I marry?
can you say at that moment that you said yes? Did you love him?
No,
Oh no, we didn't love each other.
no,
That is so crazy. That is crazy.
no.
It is. It's foreign to me.
Yeah, it is.
But there's something that's so wonderful about it.
yeah.
But it
Well,
turned out
hey-
good. It could.
52 years later.
You know
Yeah.
what? And I will say this because most people, when they think about love, they've got to go out and see somebody that they're attracted to, or that makes them tingle or something. And
Are you
a
saying there were
wonderful
no
rabbi.
tingles?
Pardon?
Are you saying there were no tingles?
No, there wasn't.
Oh wow!
Really?
Okay.
No. But what
That
it
is so
was,
crazy.
because you got to realize I was in that time, I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
I had already been in college. I was ready to get married, and for me, and with my personality, with my faith, it was a commitment. I mean, I knew how to make a commitment, and a rabbi that I love watching, he says, people, if you are married and you love the person, that's wonderful, but it's not necessary.
Wow.
It's just kind of like a nice cherry on the top.
Did your parents come to the ceremony?
No. I didn't grow up they didn't have money for that. But
So-
when we came back,
Okay, so how long are you gone before you get married? I mean, this is like within a year?
yes, it was
your
in a
parents-
matter of months.
So you say, I'm going to go to Israel. Oh, by the way, I got married.
Yeah, we got to understand. I left home 6 years prior.
Oh, that's true. Good point.
So they were used
Yeah.
to me doing whatever I thought I would do.
Right. You're jumping in Mercedes. You're doing everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to start now. Let's get to okay, so obviously I'm going to start getting into what Jewish people deal with now that I don't think a lot of people, growing up, we all knew about the Holocaust.
Which Hava, did you say that your parents, Aaron and your mother, also were Holocaust survivors?
They are. So
What is your mother's name?
Helena
Helena and Aaron.
and Aaron Levy, yes. So a real quick background on what happened to them in Bulgaria. So the chief rabbi in Bulgaria had a dream, and the dream was to go to the
bishop,
priest,
they have an Orthodox church in
church.
Bulgaria.
And his dream was to go to him and tell him that to go to the king. In the dream, he says, the bishop, go to the king of Bulgaria and tell him that when the Nazis were coming to Bulgaria, to
They
make
joined
sure,
the Nazi
he
already.
says, I will let you in. I will not fight you, with one condition, that you are not going to touch the Jewish people.
You can't take them
outside Bulgaria.
So they
And
did
so-
labor camps in Bulgaria.
And so the rabbi got up, went to the priest, and he told him, listen, he said, I need you to do something. I need you to go to the king and tell the king that he should not let the Jewish people out of Bulgaria. The king said, okay. So he had a talk with Hitler, and Hitler said, okay. So, but what they did is they did not want to have the condition was that the Jewish people could not be in the capital of Bulgaria, which is Sofia. So they had to get out of Sofia and go to the countryside. But then they would take all the men to camps. My mother was in a women's camp with my sister was just a baby, and my father was in another camp where the guys were. And
was it like horrible camps like we've seen?
It's
Well,
a
it was
working
labor
camp.
camps.
It was a
They were
labor
labor
camp.
camps, so it was hard. But they weren't brutalized.
They didn't starve them. They didn't.
They
No, they
didn't.
didn't.
And they were very, like I said, the
The
Christians.
Christians really.
The Christians were
The
on,
church, also the official church, was the one that went to the king. It was the head of the church of Bulgaria. So it was more than just the Christians. It was the actual head of the church. And of course, Christians, when you're in an Orthodox religious order, you tend to follow your leader.
Sure.
Do that. So
I'm just fascinated by that a country would say, okay, come on in and take these people, but do it on our rules, which, I mean, I can't imagine not saying, no, you're not getting anybody. This is our land. This is our country. We're going to fight until we can't fight anymore. And I guess the other side of it would be, hey, there'll be a lot less death and everything if we just give in. I mean, we're not there. We don't know. But that's just fascinating to me.
so he lost his life. The king was ultimately killed.
Sure.
And they shot him. And they
Well, that was the other
it
part
saved-
when you
it
said,
saved
well, Hitler
35
agreed to it. It wasn't like Hitler was a guy of his word.
No.
You know, I mean,
Not exactly
But
reasonable.
it literally saved 35,000 Jews. that
okay,
lived in Bulgaria.
that is, I never knew about that.
I did not know
No.
this story.
Not you won't meet anybody that knows about it.
Yeah, that's
not
crazy.
talked about. I don't know why. But.
So
Even
that
the
is
Jewish
King-
people don't know about it. You
that
know,
is
when we
King-
tell
what-
the Jewish people what happened, and they say, "Oh, we never knew that."
Golly.
So his
it
name,
was a good
his
move.
king. How would you, if you were going to research him?
Oh, we just do the King of Bulgaria during World War, or the Jews during World War II in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
I would do
Come on.
that. The
Okay.
Jews during World War II in Bulgaria.
It's a fast. It's
It's
really.
really-
But obviously, it was a very tough
Yeah.
camp for them. They did
Yeah.
labor, and they probably
Sure.
worked them to death.
Well, and
all
they
that.
lost everything.
Right,
I mean,
right,
it's
right.
like, oh, I've got to be out of town in 3 days. You want to buy my house? No, I'll just wait for 3 days
Right.
and I'll just have your house.
And we've
so.
all seen, the Diane Frank, and there's a number of movies out. There was one recently, I forget what it was called, but anyway, to be in a world that you're all of a sudden, now a lot of Jewish people saw this coming. It wasn't like a huge surprise. Like from the mid 30s on, I think, didn't a lot of Jewish people say, this is not going well. This is not going to end well for us. And I know that a number of people left before Hitler, like Einstein, his family, I think they left before all of it got crazy and all that, where they started having to wear the star and all these things. But that it goes to, we're taking everything.
Oh yeah.
We're just taking everything.
Everything.
And you're going to go over here in this camp, and
That's it.
that's it.
So my grandfather had 4 factories for tobacco. 4. Very successful businessman. So when Hitler came, they had a beautiful big house with people that, and when Hitler came, they took everything. They took the house, they took all the factories, and he had to go to a working camp.
Isn't it a huge problem now tracing families because of all that, like Jewish families, because a lot of the records were gone, like family records, family, all that stuff, because everything was taken? Is that a problem?
Today we have new adventure
there's still in a lot of countries, everything was by hand. Mm-hmm. So if it survived the war, and they kept those records because, like every place, you've got in the Jewish community, you had synagogues, the Jewish community kind of had its own system, so you had a lot of things that recorded, and if you go to Israel and you go to Tel Aviv, there's Tel Aviv Museum, and they have a genealogy department, and you can go down there and you type in your family, and they track it for you. But it was so curious because when we went one year, when they had first opened it, this was several years ago, and we asked them about it, they said, listen, the truth is, go to the Mormons.
Yeah.
They have the best genealogical records of the Jewish people in the world.
I've done my family genealogy, and it's the Mormons that have everything.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they have their own site and everything. Yeah.
Now, Hava, growing up, how the experience that your parents had, that horrific experience, how much do you think that played into your upbringing? Was it brought up? Was it not spoken of?
No, not into details, but my father was very proud of the way they were conducted their life. So I'll tell you a story about my dad. So my dad is a chemist, and before Hitler came, he was making soaps and deal for the shoes, the polish for the shoes, different items like this. Obviously, when Hitler came, everything was taken. But when they were released, when the men were released from the camps, he went where he knew where my mother was, and so he went over there and he asked her, Helen, do you have any money? Because she's not working, he's not working, but
sold something.
Yeah, whatever she could have sold, she said, not much. She said, I don't have much. And so he said, okay. He said, I'll be back. And she says, okay, now remember, the 7 o'clock curfew. Mm-hmm. If they find you after 7, they'll kill you, And he said, don't worry. He says, I'll be back. And so he leaves. I mean, he just got there. And so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, she is out crying, oh, he is probably dead. So suddenly at 2 o'clock in the morning, he has a jacket kind of put over his shoulder, and he's whistling and just
strolls up.
And she says, Aaron, what is wrong with you? The curfew. She says, don't worry, everything is fine. She says, where have you been? He said, before I tell you where I was, he says, I have a question for you. He said, if you had any desires of anything that you wanted, he said, what would that be? And she looked at him. She said, you must be out of your mind. You're asking me a stupid question. We don't have money. We don't have anything. You're asking me what would that be? And he says, no, really, what would that be? And she's kind of joking around, and she said, I would like to have sugar and white bread, which there's nowhere to be found. He said, okay. He says, in the morning, I want you to get dressed, and we're going to go shopping. She says he must have lost his mind, So in the morning, she gets up. He says, we're going to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're going to go shopping. She said, okay. She just thought, So they go out, and they go to the black market. And he said, I want you to give her white sugar and white bread. And she looks at him. She says, you are just lost it. And they do. They bring white bread and sugar. And he brings a pile of money, and he goes, here we go. Black market. She looks at him, and she says, oh, my God, did you steal that money? He said, no, I didn't steal it. So the story is, my father's a chemist. And so there is no soap in Germany back then.
Or in Bulgaria. The military confiscates everything.
Yeah. And so he does his thing, and he goes to the bar, and he tells the bartender, he says, "Would you please take this and go and wash your hands?" And he looks at it and says, "What's wrong with you? It's just a piece of rock." And he throws it back at my dad. And he said, "No." He says, "Please, go and wash your hands." So he goes and he washes his hands, and he's just like big foam starts, and he's like shocked. "Where did you get this?" And my dad said, "I made it. I made it." And he says, "You made this?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "Can you bring me more?" And he says, "Well, of course I can bring you more." He says, "Okay, I want X amount." And he says, "I would love to do this, but..." So he had the jacket on, and he kind of pulls the jacket, and he has the yellow star. He says, "I'm a Jew. I don't have any money, but if you will give me money, I'll have it here in 2 days." He says, "How much money do you want?" He says, "Well, how many soaps do you want?" To tell you the story that in 3 months, my father became a millionaire.
Oh, my goodness.
In 3 months. And so those are the stories that I heard growing up.
Wow.
You know.
Oh, the ability to overcome.
The ability to overcome. The resilience of the Jewish people is like, you're not going to conquer us. We will rise again.
Did they find forgiveness?
Yeah.
They did.
Yes. You can live a life with bitterness. You just can't do it. I mean, it will tear you apart. And if if you hear so many survivors, they will tell you, "We forgive them. We forgive them." You know.
Well, you talk about
the sages, the Jewish sages teach this. They say forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you don't forgive, it destroys your life. And so the best thing you can do for yourself and the other person is to forgive.
Unbelievable. Okay, so let's get into the anti-Semitism that seems to be getting more and more nowadays. It's been around forever. Why do you think? Let's just get to the core of it first, because I even researched it a little bit today. Why is there a hatred of the Jewish people? Like the core. I know that we talked about before, a lot of Christians, because of the handing over of Christ and things like that. But it's been more than that. And as Jimmy said, it was before Christ that it was there too. And then, of course, it's become. Why do you think?
Okay. Well, I'm going to plug myself. I have been writing on this subject now, and have been for years, because it's bugged me for 52 years.
Yeah.
But when you look back at history, and you go back as farther than even the Jewish people, and this kind of a philosophical religious concept. But I will say this on the onset, because I could talk about this subject for a long time. The anti-Semitism today is not a new hate, because anti-Semitism is called the oldest hatred. It's not a new hate, but it's the origins of it are new, or newer. And if you want to talk, we can talk about the history of anti-Semitism, or I can go to the first kind of the current kind. Would you maybe go back to the beginning a little bit?
Well, I think, for sake of time, what do you think? You just want to?
Yeah, but just you're going back to your point. When we were young, we would hear. I remember often thinking, why did Hitler want to do that to the Jews?
Right. What was the deal?
Why did he hate the Jews so much? Mm-hmm. If he was sitting here, what would he say if I said, "Why do you hate the Jews?"
Yeah.
What would he say?
My position is he wouldn't have an explanation. because there is no logic explanation of why people would hate another people without unwarranted hatred. In other words, what did anybody do to you to cause you to hate them? Everybody's going to say nothing. Most of the people would have to say, well, my friends told me to hate. And that brings us to today. But I'm going to go back, since a lot of people, like yourselves, are believers and would listen to this. My position is this: if you trace it back, the Bible says that whenever you, in Numbers, I think it's chapter 6, verse 5 or something, it talks about, God says, when you sin against a man and do an abomination to God. In other words, equating how you treat anyone, if it's negative, it's an affront. You're doing it to me. You're not doing it to them only. You're doing it to me too. And if you think about it from a spiritual perspective, God has been dealing, God gave free will to mankind. And mankind has struggled with his free will. And very early on, he decided, or she decided, and he decided, that we have free will and we're going to do something that we were told had bad consequences. But we feel like we'd like to do it, and we did it. And so that was called, the sin in the garden was called a rebellion against God. So if we start there, humanity started, and then if you trace it throughout the Bible, you see it occurring over and over again. What happened is happening in this world was already known before the creation of the world. God didn't, God created the world in his love and mercy and kindness. So humanity really dislikes unfaithful, ungodly people who don't have any faith or God or anything. They are not pro-God. And so the only thing in this world that represents God, if you look at history, is when we came from the garden to Noah. And Noah, God destroyed the world because what did he say? People hate each other so much and they treat each other so bad. I can't stand it. And he said, I'm going to try to start over again. Then we come to Abraham. Abraham was unique because he really trusted in God and believed in God and walked with God. And God said, because of you, I'm going to do something that I had already planned before the foundation of the world. Your descendants are going to hold a special place for me. A lot of people call it, we're the chosen people, the chosen one. And they were. Through Abraham, they were chosen. And it says God in the New Testament, God doesn't repent when he makes a promise. So they're the chosen people. But from the day the Jewish people became a nation coming out of Egypt, the first thing they encountered on the way from Egypt through all the nations on the way was anti-Semitism. All the nations already hated them. They wouldn't let them come through their land. They tried to go to war with them. In the very beginning, the king Amalek, his nation attacked the Jews from behind to the weakest Jews, the oldest and weakest, attacked them. And God said, every generation you have to try to destroy Amalek, the spirit of Amalek. So the Jewish people, because they are identified with God, then the physical world and people that aren't spiritual, they hate them too. They hate them because they represent God, who in our current modern world that's filled with Marxist philosophy, communist, and a religion, and Islam. Let me say this, there's a very distinct difference between Islam and Arab people. There are millions and 100 millions of Arab people that are wonderful people that don't have a clue what the jihadists and radicals are talking about. But, it doesn't take many bad apples to cause problems. And so the world, from the very beginning, God knew the climax that there's three things that identify God in this world: the Jewish people, the the Bible, and the land of Israel. Those are three things in this world that whenever you think about them, they already are attached to God. Mm-hmm. Not Europe, not America, not anyone. So in the spiritual battle of this universe, there's one thing that's trying to be destroyed, and that is, in a physical manifestation, Israel, the people, Israel, the country, and God's word. If we can destroy those three things, we can rid the earth of God altogether, and we are now the master of our own fate. And I know that's not a logical deal, but anti-Semitism is not logical. That's the only way you can understand this from a spiritual perspective.
Going back to Hitler, you ask why would he do it? I researched that.
On what he would say.
What he would say. And his deal was he blamed the Jews for Germany's loss in World War I. He had a hatred of the Jews for that. And also, I think, because of what you're saying, when somebody is connected with God and those that aren't connected with God look at those that are as, you think you're better than me. You think you have, you're more important than me, which is not what Jewish or Christians truly believe. They want them to be a part of it too. But I think that's a core of it. And then when the Jewish people were persecuted and kept being put down, the Hebrews and the Jews had to figure out ways to still survive. And one way was, and it's the stereotype, was through commerce and all that. The stereotype of Jews is they control business and they control all these things. Well, it was because that was their, correct me if I'm wrong.
They were forced into those positions.
Yeah, exactly. And so they had to make the best of what it was, and they became outstanding at it. And that now will create hatred. Well, wait, why do they make more money, or why do they have this life, or whatever? And to me, that's what. And then I think the other thing that happened, in my opinion, was that Hitler was one of the first ones, and I'm sure there were others, that made Jewish people a race as opposed to a religious or a faithful group. I think they started making it a race.
Well, during ancient history, when you look back at after the Jewish people existed, they lived in the one piece of property at that time in that known part of the world. Israel was like the tollway from Asia, from the Far East to Asia, to Europe, Turkey, down to Egypt. Where did you have to pass? You had to pass through Israel. So Israel was it's like God said, out of all the places in the world, I'm giving you this piece of territory, and it is going to be, everybody wants it, and nobody wants you, so it's going to be a constant
and that's where everything
problem.
Happens, too.
That's where everything happens.
Yeah.
What was it, Hava? You were earlier talking about Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
Which character was it that says...
Fiddler,
and he
Fiddler
said the
on
chosen...
the Roof, yes.
Tevye.
When they were already starting to rise,
the pogroms.
And he goes and he prays to God, by himself. He says, "Oh God," he says, I know we're the chosen people, but can you get somebody else?
For a little while.
For a little while.
Wait,
Well, you think about it too. Christ went through that before he was crucified, when he prayed to God and said, is there any other way we can do this? I mean, I'm open. I'm open, because I do think that, and I think people see a group, the Jewish people, as we can't. And of course, the Nazis' propaganda made them subhuman, and all that stuff. That makes, and I think a big part of it too is sometimes you hate because you're told to.
Yeah. So, if I may, if you guys come to the event. I have a young lady that's going to be one of our speakers. She's Israeli. They live in Rockwall. And she was telling me that when she was still here in high school, there was a group of, she was hanging around, going to the movies, going out to eat. October 7th happened, and the same group of kids suddenly are not talking to her. And they don't even get close. And she was like, what's going on, So she approached one of the girls, and she said, what happened? You're not, what happened to our friendship? She said, well, I cannot talk to you anymore. And she said, why? She said, because you're Jewish. She said, well, what does this have to do with anything? She says, well, my parents told me that I cannot talk to you anymore. So the ignorance is coming from the parents, They have no clue. Just because she's Jewish, she was not allowed to associate with them anymore. To go further, she was talking to her mother in Hebrew. And the one that, a young man that heard her speak in Hebrew went to her and says, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And she said, it put such fear inside of me. They have no reason to be so mean to her, just because they were told that she's Jewish and they do not want their children to hang around.
There's no logic. There's no logic.
Well, I think it's just because, first of all, I think people are frightened of other things that aren't them, that aren't like them. I think we naturally do that to a degree. But, it reminds me, this is much less serious, but I'm a huge John Wayne fan. I love John Wayne movies. And there was a documentary on a movie he made called The Cowboys. And, of course, in Hollywood, a lot of the producers and directors and all that are very liberal, and a lot of them are Jewish. And so John Wayne's a staunch conservative Christian. And so when they were going to make this movie, they decided, okay, we got to have John Wayne. He's the biggest star of all. But nobody wanted to work with him because they thought, what's John Wayne? And he's a conservative. He's not going to get And in this whole documentary, they were like, he was the greatest guy. We loved being around him. He was so nice. He was so open and all that stuff. And it just shows you how you already get this vision of what these people are supposed to be as opposed to what they are. And to me, that is so crucial when you sit here. And how many times do you see people when they sit down and talk or get together or whatever, things get ironed out. Things, you can still disagree, and you can still, we don't have the same faith as far as our God that we worship, but that doesn't mean we don't hang out and get along and respect each other. And right now, and so that kind of brings us into, well, first of all, let's talk about that event, and then we'll kind of talk about.
And I don't think we've talked about you guys being co-founders of the Ambassadors for Israel International. Which tell us about what that is.
Okay. Well, we, as Hava said, we've been going to the Jewish Christian community since we've been married, literally the 52 years. But 3 years ago, it was Hava's idea. She said, we had an organization, but she said, we know so many people. We've met thousands of people. We've taken tours. And everybody on the Christian side, they love Israel. They want to support Israel. But the truth is they don't. If you ask them, do you know any Jewish people? They'll say, yeah, my guide's name was Jacob.
Right.
They don't really, they've never tried to get into to make friends or get to know. So that's what Ambassadors are. We want to make people, educate them so they can become ambassadors for Israel. Why? What we're seeing today is a modern phenomenon, but it has deep, deep roots. Most people, again, not even studying the last 150 years of history, and if you allow me to segue to this about anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism we're seeing today, even now on the media, some media, I guess the conservative media, they're discussing that what is happening in this country today, even about the stuff in LA about immigrants, it's all the same thing. We have in this world today a group of governments, a group of wealthy individuals, a group of societies, a group of organizations that want what they want. And that is the way that they're going to get it is by creating chaos in the whole world.
Jimmy, who do you think those people are?
Well, I mean, it's you have governments, but I'll go back to the root of it. In my opinion, the where a lot of the finances come from. You know, most people don't realize before World War II, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, even where Israel was, they were not countries. These countries are created in the last 125 years. And everybody thinks, and everybody talks like, oh my God, they've been here since Abraham. No. They were, now I'll say this, they were Arabs that were wandering tribes of Bedouin, or they had some towns, but it was a clannish situation. So from Iran, which is ancient Persia, Saudi Arabia, all of that area, they wanted to create a pan-Arab state that would go from there to the Mediterranean. And that in that whole area, because remember for hundreds of years there was the Ottoman Empire. And so they had this big deal that every country was Arab. Now they could have been a different kind of Arab, like you hear all the time, the Shia and the Shiites and the Sunnis. But they got together and they said, we want the whole thing. So when Zionism started, and Jews have always lived in Israel. There's not been a generation that Jews didn't live there. And it can be trace it back historically.
But many would debate that. Is that right?
Oh yeah, the propaganda today tells you Israel has no historical connection to the land, which is basically you'd have to say I'm going to publicly deny reality. And they do it though, but what you have today is a world of people who are ignorant of reality, and their reality is on the telephone.
Well, and they also want quickly explain Zionism. Zionism is the Jewish need to be at home in the homeland.
Well, they said, you know what? We've been hated in this world forever. When we were kicked out in 135, when Rome finally, they destroyed the temple in 70, but 135 there was a revolt called the Bar Kokhba revolt. When Rome came in and destroyed that, they said, we're getting them out of here for good. So they kicked the majority of the Jews out. They left some of the peasants and farmers, and they renamed the country Palestina. It was part of the name. So that's where it came up with the name. There was no Palestine ever until Rome gave it that name, so it didn't have to be called Israel anymore, or Judea. It was really Judea. The West Bank today is made up of Judea and Samaria, the same Judea and Samaria you read about in the Bible. The Jews are called Jews. Why? Because they came from Judea. They were Jews, Judeans, but they got shortened to Jews. So to say that they don't have any historical connection just baffles. But the people today, there's political, you're talking about who they are. It's political. And I know it sounds more like a conspiracy theory, and it really is, but it's really not. In other words, we see a theory really working. And so America, since the World War II, America's had a segment of our society that has thought that it'd be better if we were socialists, better if we were communists, and they went through all the motions. And see, they had a long-term plan. They still have a long-term plan. Just like the Islamic extremists, they don't plan, like China, they don't plan for a month or a year. They plan for 500 years. And they'll tell you today, you can kill us, but our children and our children's children and our children's children's children, they're on the same path, and we're going to continue this until we win. And that's hard for Americans to do, because we'll basically, to avoid pain and discomfort, we'll kind of morph if we need to. To get, we'll get along to get along. Come along to get along, whatever you say the same. But it wouldn't be pleasant to name names or that. But I think you get the general hint that people with money, and they'll say it in the news today, the guy showing up and making this happen. Now think this horrible thought. October 7th happened. October 8th, they were having protests on universities. Now, do you know any college students intelligent and caring enough about the Palestinians that in one day they're going to have banners printed, signs
Absolutely
printed,
not.
and on a Saturday and Sunday they're going to be out? It doesn't
Well, they've
happen
been out
that
hitting
way.
the bars.
No.
They're
Doesn't
not
happen.
worried
No.
about
No,
it.
but
Well,
what
and I
you have,
think it just comes back to this, though. I think it comes back to the winners get to narrate history, right? And so, for instance, the settling of America. When I was growing up, we were proud Americans. We came in, we conquered the West, we did all these things. Yes, we knew about the terrible things that happened with the Indians, with slavery and stuff like that. But then it started getting manipulated, in my opinion, to things where we're going to leave out some stuff, but we're going to include this stuff to make our point. For instance, we always talk about how we stole the land from the Indians. Okay. Well, the Indians were stealing. They don't talk about the Indians fighting each other and stealing land from each other, because that would make a point. The slavery thing, terrible what we did with slavery here. But somebody sold us the slaves in Africa, but we don't talk about those people. We got to leave out the parts that don't help our cause, keep the parts that do. And I think that's what's happening now with you got people that are quote unquote woke, far left, that are siding with a group that if those women showed up at those places, they would be covered or killed.
Well, Greta on her boat?
Right.
Does
right.
she knows what will happen if she sails on up
But
to the
that
Gaza
doesn't
Strip?
help their cause, so let's not talk about that. We picked this cause.
I was so
we got to
hoping
keep.
she'd make it.
I know.
Hey, there was a good clip on Greta today, just for a little humor. In Israel, it came out. There was a picture of her, and it said, "A first in the world history. The victim of captivity is faced with a dilemma that the only request her captors want is for her to leave."
Right.
She's a hostage. Oh, the only hostage in history
We don't
where the
want
only
her.
request
Yeah.
is, please leave.
Well, you
I'm sorry, I
have.
cut you off, Billy.
No,
I
you're
went
fine.
I went on my Greta thing. I had that image of her.
But you go to the thing like, okay, you have like Trump. If you like him or don't like him, Trump is a nationalist. He's like, we got to put America first right now. I'm tired of we're just going up. And the liberals hate that. What are you doing? We can't be. That's nationalist. They compare him to Hitler and all that. And then you have the what's her name? The senator that I think she's from Minnesota. She's
Elizabeth Warren?
no, the Islamic
Omar.
okay.
Omar, yeah. Where now she's at this thing about the immigrants, and she's mad that we're and she's mad at the Israelites or the Jews, and saying they're mad that Trump has put America first. But now in her argument against Jewish people, it's like, why do we care about another country? We should be caring about our own country, which is the complete opposite.
We should care
yes,
about this country.
but the only
We
reason
care
she's
so
saying
much
that,
we want to protect all the illegal immigrants that are here
yeah.
without.
which is complete opposite of what she said before, because it's got to fit the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think all of us do it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that we're innocent of it. I think any type of history is extremely complex. Texas becoming a country and then becoming a state, there was a lot of things that happened. It wasn't just guys rose up, we beat the bad guys, and we're here. There's a ton of complex things. And I think that what we have now is we got to simplify it, and we got to make it our side. I mean, you see it on the news every day. I mean, you watch Fox, it's the same event. Fox is reporting it one way, CNN's reporting it the opposite way. And we don't have a truth anymore.
But going back to the event we're having on the 23rd,
Yes, I wanted
I'm
to-
sorry I took that.
No,
I
no,
can
that
chase
was wonderful.
rabbits as good as any Texas boy
Okay,
can.
I love it.
But what we're doing, and we're doing it local, this is purely, anybody can come, but we did it because Rockwall has been so supportive of us for the last couple of years as we've done this. And we have people from Rockwall show up at every event. We've done events here in Rockwall. We've done in Rowlett. We did our last
Ambassadors for Israel.
Ambassadors for Israel. The last event we did in Frisco, we had about 300 people come, and we're just trying. And again, at that meeting, it was very unusual. When you go to, we've been on boards of some Jewish organizations. When you have at a Jewish event, a big event, a gala or a fundraiser, it's 98% Jewish people show up. Christian events, the same thing. No, it's 99.8% show up because the Jewish people have no reason to go to Christian events. But we had a really good mix. We almost had a 50-50 blend. We had 4 rabbis there, 3 Orthodox, 1 conservative. We had a lot of wonderful people, and it's great to find out, just as you had mentioned at the very beginning of the show, we have so much more in common. Mm-hmm. There's an organization that wrote a paper back, I think it was 2003, and it was about the relationship between Jews and Christians, and the authors were all Jewish scholars and secular religious, but they said something. They said we got to understand there is one thing that will never be reconciled between us until the final redemption.
Right.
And that is the question of the Messiah. Mm-hmm. But other than that, mm-hmm. we have all things in common. Mm. So you know what? You believe what you believe about Jesus. Let us believe what we believe. But let's focus on those things that are important. Changing the world for good. Bringing light to the world. Both Jews and Christians have been commanded to be light in the world. Mm-hmm. That's our job, not to fight for doctrines or fight for even key elements. But in our event here, we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, but not only anti-Semitism in a big general sense, but really what's going on in our community. Yeah. So Colonel West, as a speaker, mm-hmm. we've asked him to talk about, in his experience, what has he seen? Because it's being publicized very broadly now, that even in Texas, which is kind of a bastion of conservatism for most people, not in the main cities, the big cities, you have politically they're blue, if that's the color.
The inner city.
But in the rural area of our country, they talk at night. And I see these headlines: America's on fire, the U.S. is on. I'm thinking, not if you don't live in Los Angeles downtown.
Right.
If you live in Beverly Hills, the world's a beautiful place.
Right.
You live out in Riverside, it's beautiful. Yeah. You live in Malibu, beautiful. But the world is burning down. It's so much hype and nonsense. But when you look on that, the world is burning. America's burning. People want to make the world believe that the world is collapsing, and because people are believing it, the world really is collapsing. Mm-hmm. But in our event, we're going to be talking about that for our area. What is happening in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that we need to be aware of? Because, an army that's coming in like a Trojan horse, you don't even pay attention. You just think it's a beautiful edifice here. But soon you're going to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, we lost control, and we never knew it.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about those things. And like Hava said, we're going to have Stephanie, who's going to talk about, as a young lady, her experience, but also now she goes to American University in Washington, and she's got an internship with the Israeli embassy in Washington, and she knew the couple who were killed a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So she's going to talk about that. And then we have a gentleman, his name is Benji Gerson. He's the president and founder of American Jewish Conservatives. And he's going to talk about the Jewish people and their resilience, because they've been dealing with this a long time. And so it depends. You gotta find out how to have a good attitude in a bad situation. And so he's going to talk about that, and we're going to have a good time together.
That's great.
And we welcome everybody to come out. And I'll just pitch this: if they want to go to our website, ambfii.org, ambfii.org, ambfii.org. They can register if they want. I will tell you we're 80% sold. So we don't have very much space yet, but if anybody wants to show up, they're welcome to
I got to get online about my tickets.
Yeah. You know, I want to talk about something too that it's a microcosm, but you wish it could happen. Like I said, when I started in advertising, the first agency I was with was majority of our clients were Jewish. And they had these, and so I didn't know much about Jewish faith. So I remember, and I would sit with the owner of these restaurants that we promoted and stuff, and a great guy, and he was just real blunt, and I loved it. And he came in one day and he goes, "So you're a Christian?" And I said, "Yeah." And I never forget. He was like, "So you believe in the virgin birth?" And I was like, "Well, seeing as the cornerstone of my faith, yeah, I do." And I remember asking him, "So you don't think he was the Son of God?" And he goes, "No." And it started out a great conversation. And the things that, because, and I think the one thing that Christianity fails at, that the Jewish people do so well, is they were so, your faith has to be your life.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be a part of your life. And I'll never forget, he wanted to go to a Cowboy game, and it was on a Saturday. It was a Saturday night game, and you can't, and I forget what the whole situation was, but he can't ride in a car, he can't get in the elevator, and all that stuff.
Till after dark.
So he's like, "I still want to go to the game, though." So we went above and beyond. We had him, he stayed at a hotel right near the stadium. This is back at, when it was Texas Stadium. And then he gets there, and we had to call. He's like, "Man, I can't go up the elevator." We got him a suite. Yeah. He goes, "I can't go in the elevator." So we're like, okay. So we had to call my boss was calling Texas Stadium, maintenance or whatever. And they basically came down and got him, took him up on the catwalks, brought him around just so he could go into the suite. And I started thinking, man, how great is it that you're that faithful to your faith? Because I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of Christians be like, "All right, well, you're not supposed to do this. I'll do it this time." It ain't that big a deal. And I think that's the difference sometimes, because I feel like the Jewish faith is a lot of works, a lot of tradition, all these things. And Christian faith, we have those, but we don't have them as serious.
Detached.
Yeah. And I learned so much from him.
Just think about this. Once you start compromising on walking, I mean, he could have taken the deal. You start what you're doing is you start watering down
exactly
on who you are as a Jew, and once you start watering down, no big deal.
Yep.
And then this is where you kind of lose who you are.
And that's admirable that you that's what the whole reasoning is.
Yeah.
And of course, that was the conflict when Christ came along, and he's telling these Jewish people, "You don't do that anymore." "What do you mean? We've been doing it for thousands of years. You're going to tell me not to do it?" This is our life.
That leads me to a question for you guys, and this is something I heard a lot growing up, is I love the Jewish people, but it's so sad that they have not taken Jesus Christ as their personal Savior. Yeah. They will not make it to heaven. What would you say to a pastor that was sitting at this table that says, "You're not going to heaven unless the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ"? What would you say to them?
Well, first thing I would say is he needs to read his Bible better.
He's not going to take that well.
But you know what? That's where most problems are, because you believe what you want to believe. And I don't care. It's like one of the politicians said one time when somebody was giving him facts. He said, "Don't confuse me with the facts. Mm-hmm. I know what I believe, and that's it." Well, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. The Bible, and again, you need to, this is what I learned so much when I went to Israel. I went to Israel and I learned how to look at the Bible from a totally different perspective. From a historical perspective, but I learned to look at it in context, because I was living in Israel, and what was written in the New Testament and the Old Testament was happening that day. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. On Friday afternoon, the deal's going. There's a great story about that philosophy of life, because the Jewish people always ask, "Well, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that?" They can tell you, we can do any of it. We choose not to. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why? Because our God asks us to not do it. And how are we going to tell him no?
Right.
And so it's a part of respect and honor and fear of God. Not fear that, oh my God, he's going to hurt me. No, it's fear that I'm going to disappoint him. It's fear that, my God, I'm going to stand before him one day. In a lot of synagogues, you see this text that says, Da lifnei mi ata omed. It says, know before whom you stand. Mm-hmm. If you have those kind of thoughts in your psyche and in your conscience at all times, and faith is supposed to be all the time. So if your faith tells you, you have to consider every word you say, every thought you think, every action you take, are you doing what God has asked you to do? People would live different lives, Christians and Jews, if you considered that simple predicament. And I went off on that, so I'm not sure if I'm...
Well, and you talked about would Jewish people go to heaven if they don't accept Christ?
Yes.
Yeah.
There would be many a pastor that would sit
Yes.
here, and,
Right.
and I was just wondering the response to that and how that makes you feel to hear that.
Well, it's sad to me because, first of all, I know that they haven't read their Bible, and I know I don't want to be insulting. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, but Christians have, and how can I say it? You help me to say it kinder or nicer, because I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm just saying
I don't think
this.
it's mean at all.
Christians have learned to read the Bible because I've seen it. I mean, it's not like I haven't experienced this. When you first become a believer, I see you get these scripts. Mm-hmm. If you want to find out about salvation, here's the scriptures you verse. If you want to find about healing, here's the verses you read. You want to find about love, here's the 2 Corinthians. You want to find about this, here's the verses. In other words, the Bible is used as a proof text. And it's only verses that prove your point that are important, because you can read a verse that says exactly the opposite and you don't even give it the time of day.
Right.
You don't even consider, well, that said the opposite of what I believe. You just say, I'm not thinking about that. I know what I want. And so it's that, because the Bible says this, and this probably will shock everybody. But think about it in context of all we've said tonight. And when we talked about the Jewish people, their identity, their association with God. God told them, you're going to suffer because of me choosing you. Because the world not going to like you. You're going to suffer double what anybody else suffers. I mean, it says that. You're going to suffer double what anybody else. But at the end of time, and I would suggest you reread Romans 11 a little bit. At the end of time, it says, because remember, God has a plan. Before he created the world, he had a plan. He's not going at this helter-skelter, and if something happens, he said, oh my God, I got to kind of change directions here. It's all, he knows, like David said, you know what I'm thinking and going to say before I even knew I was thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So with all that in mind, we know that God created the world for a purpose. And when it comes, at some point it's going to come to an end, when the Messiah comes and brings redemption to the world. And if you read the prophets, and where the prophets talked about, in Hebrew it says, Acharit Yamim, in the end days, the end of time, this thing is going to happen and that's going to happen. And basically, if you got it all together, it's going to say all the nations of the world are going to come against Israel. All the nations. And at some point, they're going to say to themselves, we got them now. God cannot save them. Matter of fact, God is not even listening anymore. And he says when it gets to that moment, I'm closing down history. And he says, and on that one day, I am going to forgive Israel of all of their iniquities and their sins.
Well,
and so the idea of what their future is, and even though you say, well, he died or he did, God's forgiveness doesn't care if you're dead or not. The judgment, what Christians have a fallacy a little bit in that when they say emphatically, I'm saved right now. Saved is when God pronounces you saved when you stand before him. Right now it says you're working out that salvation. You're in the process. But when we stand before God, he will pronounce what our eternity will be like.
So we're right there in that nitty-gritty of
I think
where it differs, the religions.
Because I do disagree with some of that, but I also my deal is this. I've tried to...
You're not the first.
But I will say this. Only way I know is through Christ. That's all I know, and I've read the Bible, and I've gone through that. But I will say exactly what you said. God has said he will forgive. And what is he forgiving? That ain't my job to worry about. And that's also the thing where I come back to as far as our going to heaven. I know how I'm going. Okay, I know how I've taught my family, or me and my wife have shown our family and let them make that decision. One thing what's the old thing? There's two truths. I think it's in the movie Rudy. There's two truths in the world. There is a God, and I'm not him. That's the two truths. Yeah. And that's God's job as far as deciding what's going on. I know my path, but I do believe that if you're a chosen people, things will probably work out for you. I think, if God says you're the chosen people and you're my people, I got to think that's a good team to be on.
But think about this phenomenon also. In today's world, Christians and Jews are getting together, something they have never done in 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. Never.
Well, I think the persecution is a part of that too, right? Don't you think a little bit of that?
Yes, but it's bigger than that, because when we first started 50 years ago, but we go to churches of pastors. I knew them. They'd say, Jimmy, please don't come back, because you're influencing young people, and we don't want you doing that. We go to synagogue, and the rabbi would say, Jimmy, you're part of the congregation, but we don't want to. We are not interested in relationships. So if you want to be here, you come here. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to mix, and so we dealt with that. It was only in the last, really, there's been a movement. Even there's been Zionist Christians for hundreds of years. But in the last really 25 years, it has blown up. There are hundreds of millions of Christians, especially in Asia, that love Israel, that pray diligent for her every day, that come, that give. It's estimated that since October 7th, between Christians and Jews, $1 billion has been given to help families, humanitarian needs, social needs, humanitarian, not military and that, but for people. And there's a coming together, which is also for Christians that ought to be a little bit, it's kind of like telltale signs. Mm-hmm. And you say, wait a minute, this never happened before, but do I see it anywhere? And and I'm a firm believer that, I hope the Messiah comes back tonight. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't, at least tomorrow, But if he waits, but what we know is, before that culmination of history, people faithful to God are going to be getting together. We're going to be drawn. Why? Because we're going to be thrown into the same pot. Mm-hmm. You see Christianity today, people are saying, in our society in America in the last few years, you've had people trying to shut down Christian organizations, churches, everything to do. They got, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, got prayer out of school. Yeah. They're trying to delete, like we said before, they're trying to delete God from the world. Mm-hmm. And when you delete that, after the Jews, who's next? Mm-hmm. Like the Islamic jihadists. I have a lot of Arab friends. Arab culture's beautiful. But radical anybody, Christians, Jews, Arabs, it's not a good thing. But we're coming together because we're being forced together, because the Jewish people can't fight anti-Semitism and win. It's not going to ever be won. But if Christians don't join in, the Jewish people are the focal point of anti-Semitism. How are they going to win the argument? Yeah, don't hate us. Well, no, we hate you.
That's too, the horses
but
out of the
Christians
barn.
can come and say, we got a couple of billion of us here. We can make a difference. So that's why we're trying to get Christians involved to say, guys, it's your time to stand up for the right side of history.
And I think that is there's a lot of Christians, we talked about this before, doing mission trips that go on these mission trips and are getting killed and are in dangerous places. But I think there's a majority of Christians that we don't know persecution the way it's starting to pile up that Jewish people have dealt with for thousands of years, and not even close to what Jewish people have dealt with, but starting to get the hate that that you get. But as far as the redemption and stuff, I always think of it this way: when Christ comes, the way I look at it, it'll be your first, our second, and we're all good.
Hey, there's a lot of rabbis. We have this discussion, and they say, the honest truth is this: as a Jew, as a rabbi, I don't care who the Messiah is going to be. I mean, he's going to be somebody. If he comes and it's Jesus, he said, I'm just going to ask him what took him so long.
Right.
He said, I don't care if it's going to be Jesus.
Right.
He said, but right now, I don't believe.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, a guy's at least being honest. I don't believe.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, I've got a question for you, Hava. Heaven and hell, for you, as you know, in our faith, it's growing up, especially Southern Baptist. If you know anything about Southern Baptist, it's fire and brimstone, often, meaning if you do not do this, you will burn in hell forever. A place where fire burns you forever, literally. Many believe literally. What does the Jewish faith say about heaven and hell, and who goes and who doesn't?
There's no single. I mean, in the Jewish position, it's all over the board. There's
meaning some believe,
some. Well, I mean, the honest answer is nobody knows, and so in the Jewish mind, you're taught. In Moses said something interesting in Genesis. Not Genesis. Maybe Exodus 19. But he said this. He said the hidden things belong to God. In other words, those things that God hasn't clearly explained, they belong to him. They're none of our business.
Do you believe in a place called hell?
Yes.
You do.
But he said this. He said the things that are plain to us, they're our responsibility. And so the thing about in the Jewish world, speculating on something that, it's kind of like it can be a fun sport or a fun activity, but at the end of the day, nobody's right, nobody's
that's
wrong.
it too. I agree with that. That ain't again. I don't blow off. Not my problem. It's
exactly
the way I go. But
that was the best.
As long as a Jewish person, we believe in mitzvot. Mitzvot is a good deed.
Mitzvot.
In other words, doing what God asked you to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of in relation to treating other people, loving your neighbor. Go ahead. Well, here's what it amounts to. In other words, people want to be harsh and judgmental. It's kind of a religious nature. But in Judaism, if you're an ultra something, you're going to be an hater of something. But for most people, it's listen, I'm not your judge. I'm not going to be the one. I need to. The only one that I need to be concerned about is me.
That's
and how I live.
If you were to die right now, what do you think would happen to you?
I would be with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses,
on the same
and
seat.
Sarah, and Jesus, and all the apostles.
Do you believe some people, when they died, if they died right now, they would not be at that location? That space?
Obviously there's people who have no faith. And faith is the element. I mean, the Hebrew Bible talks about it too. But a person, no man can know another man's heart. A man's heart is who he really is. And I've tried to understand the difference between the soul and the heart. And the heart is really, it's really that place when something happens to you suddenly and you react to it. That's who you are.
Monopoly.
But if you don't like that, you say, God, I need you to help me clean my heart and replace that thing with something better.
I think we know when we're, if you want to call it sinning or not doing what God wants us to do. We know it. Yeah. I see it as the Holy Spirit. I feel that that's me with Christ, accepting Christ. But it's, if you've accepted Christ,
right?
And I have, and I fully believe, I pray, but when it comes to heaven, hell, Catholics and purgatory, all these things,
we get caught up in that.
We do, but I don't.
As Christians, we certainly do.
All I know is
makes
this.
it easy, doesn't it? It makes it easy to be judgmental and say, "Hey, you don't do like you don't believe like me." Yeah.
All I know is this: heaven. The most precious thing we have on earth is gold, and heaven's streets are paved with it. That's the lowest thing.
Think about that.
Yeah. So that's kind of gives you a picture of how things are. Yeah. But again, your faith, your what is your life like? As Christians, we go. You all talk about servitude and doing deeds and everything because God has asked you. Ours is, if you've accepted Christ, you will naturally do these deeds. That God doesn't want you to do the deeds, then you become a Christian. It's the opposite. It's, you've accepted Christ, you will naturally. That's what I always tell people when they're getting all mad about, when they get mad when they say, well, when Jesus was here, he didn't do anything about slavery. He didn't do anything about women's rights. And I'm always like, well, he wasn't Ralph Nader. He wasn't, Jesus came down to say, if you accept me, you're not going to do these things. These things will go away. And that was the Jewish faith too. And then you have every sect, like the Jews, where we read about with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all those that started taking it too far in the Jewish faith, that started like, okay, I kind of dig this power. I kind of like what we're doing. Let's just make it to our advantage. That's the ones that I think God's looking at going, that's the harshest punishment is for those that, and in Christianity, the false prophets.
That's the difference between faith and religion.
Yes. Yes.
Faith is, a Jewish person doesn't do an action hoping he'll get saved because of it.
Exactly.
He has the faith in God.
Preacher to your list of real estate, vitamins. Is preacher one of them? Because I'm learning a lot.
But
Jewish preacher.
But you don't have in your innermost heart and mind, I'm going to wake up this morning. When in Judaism, when you wake up in the morning, you say a prayer. It's called the Modani, and it says, I give thanks before you, O God, creator of everything, for restoring to me my soul today. Great is your faithfulness. So when you start out your day saying, God, I'm only here because you let me have the gift of another day. You're not sitting around thinking, well, if I'll do something, God,
right.
will do.
I can earn some points.
It's not like that. Yeah. It's not like that. You do it because, it's like a child with his father. Man, I want to make him happy. He has been good to me. He provides for me. I have no cares in the world because of my father. Well, as a grown-up, we have the same, if we have faith in God, it's the same thing. And in the Jewish world, faith is no different for a Jew than it is for a Christian. Faith is believing in God.
And also,
you can't divide that out.
And also, I think faith, there's a reason, in my opinion, there's a reason that the Bible, those that aren't Christian or Jewish, like, well, why didn't God do this? Why didn't he say this? Why didn't he make it easier for this? Well, that's the whole point of faith, in my opinion, is God, I feel like, is like, I'm giving you what I want you to know. Now, how much do you really rely on me? How much are you going to rely on me? And I'm going to make your life, it's going to get pretty rough. Y'all, you definitely know. But like in our scripture, because you're not of this world, I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. That's in John. And that's
there's a good description right there.
Right.
Say it one more time.
That's in John 15:19. Because you are not of this world, but I chose you out of this world, therefore the world hates you. And that's what we say as Christians all the time. This is just our temporary place. And I think the Jewish people feel the same way. We're going to a better place. But also God is like, I want you how much faith do you have if you go through this, and this? You talk about Job, his wife's against him, all these terrible things, and God allows Satan to make Job's life hell. He stays with him. The Jewish people are sticking with him through all this. How many times would a normal person be like, all right, I'm done. I'm out after the Holocaust or after this, or I'm done. I'm going to go find something else. You can't do that because it's your faith. Yeah. It's your life. Yeah. And I think that's the way we are as Christians too. It's me. When people would tell me, when you make a decision, well, I don't want you to make that decision based on your faith. It needs to be secular. I can't do that. My life is is Christ. And so, y'all are the same way. It's like, that's a part of me. And so that's where I think God has said, because the hardest thing for me, y'all, you said it, and we see it in the New Testament too. God tells us, by the way, things are going to get really bad. They're going to get real bad. So as much as you try to make things better, y'all are doing great work. We try to do great work. God tells us it's going to get really bad at some point. We don't know when, so do your best. And I think that's where we're at. Yeah.
I would just like to add to what you just said. There is a saying in Hebrew that it says tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means repairing of the world. When we are born, we're born with a mission to repair the world. Whatever the surrounding is around us, our job is to repair the world.
Our world.
Because this is why we're born. There's evil. There is always going to be evil. And it's our job to make it better. And this is also another reason why we're doing our events, is because we want to bring tikkun olam. We want to bring understanding to whoever's listening, that there is a better way, that voices for truth are important, because if you don't hear the truth,
right,
how would you know?
How would you know?
How would you know?
And we're in a world now, though, you look at politics, where we don't want to go to the other side. Like, look at what the Democrats did when they visited Trump after he was elected. How many of the Democrats, when they went and visited him, how the other Democrats just got on him? Yeah. That's what you're supposed to do in politics. That you're supposed to do to work together. Republicans should be crossing the aisle and talking to the liberals and Democrats, and we should be. But we're in a world now that it's got to be divided. And our side has to win. And I think that's a big part of it too, is we're in it to win. We're not in it to do the right thing. We're in it to win. And that makes it tough.
Mentioning politics, let me ask this question. How on earth, and I mean this earnestly, could you be Jewish and a liberal Democrat in this world today? It honestly baffles me. I would love for someone to say, here's why, Jay. What is the answer to that?
Yeah. Well, of course, we tend to generalize. And what I mean by that is one person's reason is not the other person's reason. Most Jewish people, because of their persecution, when they came to America and America developed politically, you had, in the Democrats of that day, they were very socially minded. Mm-hmm. Taking care of people, helping, education, all of these, pillars within a society. Mm-hmm. Educate your children, make sure nobody goes hungry. In both Judaism and Christianity, there's two pillars that we share. One is to love God with all your heart, and the second is to love your neighbor. And who is your neighbor? Anybody that you meet is your neighbor. So in that context, the Jewish people, the Jewish people, even though you have people in different communities that don't like them, but the Jewish communities were there in Selma marching with the African Americans. Jewish people were killed. If you remember some of the workers that went down there, they're Jewish. They were killed to try to help the African Americans. The Jewish people have always sided because they've suffered from that same bias and we call it unwarranted hatred. The Bible calls it that.
And including white supremacists.
That's right. That's right. The rabbis themselves say that the reason the Messiah hasn't come yet is because we haven't prepared the world for his coming. And he didn't come in a time they had thought he was coming, because it says our sins were too great, that the world is not ready for him, because our faith has to do something. You know, when God sees that his people are wanting him, he comes to visit. And so there's a lot of things. And I see we kind of turned this, our little meeting here into a... I hope we got all the questions you wanted.
Well, I think we got peace in the Middle East pretty soon with all this.
Hey, it'll come soon.
Yeah,
come
sure.
soon.
Why not? Just come to this podcast.
Yeah.
And I just love this talk, though, because and that's why it reminds me of back when I used to talk with our clients, and we would just have these open talks about stuff, because it's okay to not. I mean, I don't agree with my wife on some stuff. You know, I don't agree 100% with my
And
church.
you'll say that on air?
We're going to edit this part out, Jay.
She doesn't listen.
Right, that's true. Good point. But I do call her my current wife. That's probably a problem.
I forgot you did.
Yeah. I did. Anyway, we have a good time with that. It's starting to get serious. But anyway, but I just think that I just don't understand why we can't do this. Well, we've had a liberal on here, Amy Thibodeau, opposite of our political beliefs. We had a pretty good talk. Got a little heated a couple times, but love that. I want to hear from everybody, and there's a valid. That's the other thing I come back to. I think a lot of people. First of all, you talked about why are Jewish people voting Democrat, liberal Democrat. I think a lot of times
70% of all Jews vote Democrat.
I think it goes across the board with everybody,
but it's changing.
But we changed. Yeah, this
changing.
last one we saw. Listen, at some point, everybody admits that the Democratic Party has changed so dramatically that it doesn't represent those values anymore. Now, you have a lot of people in America that they are politically ignorant. They're just following their peers.
Well, nowadays you can find what you want to get your beliefs.
Especially if they'll pay you to do it.
To do it. But what I was going to say is, I would assume that a majority of Jewish people voted Democrat through the 50s and 60s and all that. My dad was a Southern Democrat, okay? And he was as conservative as anybody else, but he was loyal to the Democratic Party until the day he died. He was a yellow dog. And because it's like, that's my party. And I think a lot of Jewish people are probably like that. I can't abandon. And so I think that's
let me play devil's advocate with you, because I don't feel this way at all myself. But we talk about I could imagine someone saying, okay, you sat there and said love your neighbor, which is anyone. How could this be going on in the Gaza Strip? How could the Jews allow that? That's something we hear a lot on the news.
Allow what? Yeah.
Allow what?
Allow the suffering and the pain that the Jew, and this is them talking, not me.
I understand.
But I wanted to say, you hear that so much of that protest is, how could the Jews do that to those poor people in Gaza, starving them, bombing them?
Yeah.
And I
I understand exactly the question.
I don't believe that in myself.
No, I know you don't. But let me answer it simply. The same people that are asking that question are the people that are saying from the river to the sea, which means we would like every Jew to be killed from the river to the sea. That's all that means. There's no hocus pocus.
I believe they want that.
They want that. Well, now, how are you going to answer a guy that says, why are you making people suffer? And I'm going to answer to you, and you're saying, but I would like you to be dead. I mean, it's such a strange, our world has gone kind of crazy, and we don't really think about what we're saying, what we're doing. But Israel, on October the 6th was a Friday night. Hava and I, we had just come back from Israel 2 weeks before, and we were in the Grand Cayman. Saturday night about 11:30, Friday night about 11:30, I start getting, my phone starts buzzing, vibrating, and I'm looking, and it pictures that you would never want to look at, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's Shabbat. I'm closing my phone. I'm not going to talk about it, because it's tradition to not discuss negativity on Shabbat. There'll be Sunday, we can start talking about it, but Sabbath. So we ended up going to synagogue the next day. We didn't say anything, but one of the visitors that came, because we're all visitors being in Camas, he said something. Of course, the rabbi didn't know because he didn't watch television or listen to the news on Friday or Saturday. And you thought to yourself, you sing this, and then you hear, we get on the radio, start listening, 1,250 people. I don't know if you've seen, if you want to see the footage, I can get you a film that the embassy puts out.
They tried to ask Greta to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that?
Yes.
She wouldn't watch it.
She wouldn't. But if you saw
Doesn't help
it,
her point.
Yeah.
you would say to yourself, this is, even wild dogs wouldn't do
I have
this
heard
to
it.
people.
You've seen that video?
Oh, yeah.
You've seen it.
It wasn't a coincidence
And
that
then,
it was...
and then you say to you're saying to those people, what are we supposed to do? Just say, oh,
Right.
if that you want to come to kill us, well, just come on.
Right.
Yeah. Why like 9/11 happened? Mm-hmm. Go kill them. Mm-hmm. America has the right to go do that.
Right.
But God forbid the Jews protect themselves.
That's
for
what I'm saying.
once.
Yeah. They didn't start the attack.
The Allies in World War II, I think they said on D-Day the other day, I was listening, the guy said, in that time in the war, 100 million people died, mainly civilians. Hiroshima, 300,000 people in the blink of an eye.
Women, children.
Evaporated.
Yeah.
Women, there was nobody said, well, leave
Everyone.
the children alone. No, the children are gone. It's only concerning the Jewish people that people start saying war has to be different than war.
Yes.
You can't do it. It's like the Jewish people. You're talking about a country. Israel is the size, really, of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, the greater area.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's the state of New Jersey. It's tiny. It's tiny. Israel gave the Arabs Gaza. It was in Israel's hands 20-something years ago. They gave it to them. They left because it was a deal, land for peace.
And they gave more than that also.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's land for peace. Well, Israel got no peace. There's a saying in Hebrew, and Israel says this, there'll be peace when they love their children more than they love death. Because they raise their children to sacrifice themselves. Women will say, I've got 7 boys, and I can't wait for each one of them to blow themselves up to kill Jews. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But again, there's no logic to it.
Right.
Israel is the only army in the world that is held to a high ethical standard. Now, does some people goof up? Yes. But you can't say an army is going in and killing people unconsciously when they will send leaflets and drop leaflets by the hundreds of thousands telling people, leave the area. They'll call them on phone with automatic call-ins, get out of town. Mm-hmm. If they're going to blow up a building, they'll drop what they call knockers on the building, on the roof, that make you hear the thuds. When the thuds hit, it won't be long and there won't be a building anymore. And that's even the bad guys. They let the bad guys know. So what other country or military does things like that? Nobody.
If I may just add to what Jimmy is talking about, October 7, before October 6, everything was fine. They took advantage of the fact that they knew that there was holidays coming up. So I would say 90% of the soldiers went home because I think nothing will happen, go home. So there was a handful of soldiers that were guarding Israel. The massacre was so severe
It's a quick.
that some of the bodies, they couldn't even recognize who they were. They recognized this by one tooth that they found. And by the DNA, this is how they knew who that one person was. I just want to go back to the question that you have. How could Israel do that? Did you know that Israel provides Gaza with electricity? They don't pay them. They
Water.
don't charge anything. They give them electricity. They give them water. They bring food.
All the food has to come through Israel.
They bring them food, which the Hamas captures. They take the food, and then they sell it to the Palestinians
For ungodly prices.
You want a pack of cigarettes? $50. You want bread? $50. They have to pay Hamas for the food that's been given for free.
Humanitarian aid.
By Israel. Israel brings the trucks, one after another, with food, with...
And other countries have helped also.
So I'm saying it boggles my mind. Why would anybody say, how could Israel do that? Israel was provoked to war.
Right, yeah,
I mean, they killed us, they raped us, they killed our children. They burnt our children in the oven. Babies, they put them in the oven in front of their
with
mothers.
a smile on their face.
With their, the young lady with the 2 kids that they kidnapped, the redheaded.
Yes.
They choked the children in front of her before they raped her, killed her.
It's the only.
And then you say, how could Israel do
Right,
that?
yeah.
Well,
But
what is
it's-
Israel
yeah, but
It's the
supposed to
only
Israel's
time
the
I
bad
think that
guy.
we ever. That's what amazes me. Nobody ever questioned why the United States, after Pearl Harbor, attacked.
No, we celebrate it.
Exactly.
But yet, like I said, God forbid for once Israel try to protect
Right,
themselves.
right.
I get angry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I tell you the truth.
But one of my favorite
Israel's-
movies is Munich. You
Yeah.
ever seen the movie Munich? I'm
yes.
sure you have. It's
Yeah.
like that one. There's very few movies where the Jewish people get back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Munich and Inglorious Bastards are like go get them.
But Israel's not just trying to protect Israel. Israel is trying to protect Western civilization. Because the Arab culture is a beautiful culture. I'm not talking about the radical religion. The culture is beautiful. Been around thousands of years. But the religion is not a Western. It's like oil and water. Islam cannot exist within Western civilization. And it's like what happened in Denmark. I saw a couple of weeks ago, a guy was in Denmark, and full of, Arabs, Muslims as far as you could see, and saying the Danish, they don't want to live among us. They don't want to live among us. They want to rule us. Well, wait a minute. You're in Denmark.
Yeah,
They don't want to live
I
among
don't
us.
wrap my mind around that. It's backwards.
Yeah, it is backwards, but that is the purpose. Islam has one goal, and I'm glad to say it for everybody. Their ultimate goal in the radical Islam, not regular Muslims that go to mosque and are wonderful people. Radical Islam's goal is like it was in Europe when they marched through Europe, devastating everyone. Mm-hmm. And when they conquered Europe, conquered a lot of the Middle East and Europe and Africa, they only know one thing. Because you're talking about what you believe, their belief is this. You either are going to be Muslim or dead. Mm-hmm. That's your only option.
Right.
You want to go to heaven, we'll send you there real quick.
But also think about that. When the Gaza war started and they start moving the Palestinians to the other side of Gaza, and the option was, okay, Jordan, take a few. Egypt, take a few. Nobody wants them. Not only they did not want them, but Egypt, I don't know if you saw
Egypt, have you seen their gate?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that wall that they built?
The wall.
Yeah, you won't get over.
it's-
You won't get through.
It's
that.
not a gate.
No.
It is and they've never once opened
They
it.
don't want them because they know they're troublemakers and they don't want it.
Well, if
They
you
don't
studied
want it.
history, this is something we're on a different subject, but in the UN, the Palestinians is the only people in the world that have been given a designation of refugees. If somebody else is kicked out of the country, like Syrians go somewhere. Once you've lived there and you're going to live there, you're not a refugee anymore. You're in a different country.
Right.
You're an
immigrant.
whatever. You're immigrant. Yeah. And if they let you in, you're a legal immigrant. You're not a refugee. The Palestinians, think about this, Gaza. What do they say about Gaza? It contains the largest, refugee camp in the world. Now, in Gaza, which is a Palestinian-controlled area that was given by Israel to them, they live in a refugee camp. Now, how can you be a refugee camp in your own country? Why? Because they're considered refugees. Why? Because it keeps the narrative alive.
Right.
That Israel, the Jewish people, have displaced them. Where did they displace them from? There's never been a Palestinian leader that was ever born in Palestine. They're from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, wherever, but not any Palestinians. Palestinian flag was invented in 1964, I believe. There's never been. This is a farce that it's like, as you would know from Scripture, it is a deception on the world. They're deceived for some reason, and it's so obvious. But yet, when you want to be deceived, or maybe you don't want to be, but you are.
Do you think that they are? Sometimes I wonder if they're thinking, "Wow, this is kind of working out for us. This whole victim thing, and the Jews are trying to kill us. This is working pretty good. So now let's go with the narrative of we're trying to love them, but they're destroying us."
Yeah.
I mean, that's just me kind of.
Well, look at
I'm
the Greta.
wondering
But that's the whole propaganda doing America today.
Yeah.
It's America now.
Blue-haired
People now you've got
that
people
want to get out there and scream
You've got
about
people
it.
saying America used to be something else. Today, the Republicans have changed into these whatever they are because they no longer care about humanity. They want to take out these immigrants. Well, of course, they're immigrants and legal in their minds, but they're just good people. People just are too occupied with themselves. I mean, we have become
self-indulgent.
And self-indulgent.
Yeah, because, the Greta Thunberg thing, when she was doing the video saying, okay, we're about to be taken over by the Israelis, and this may be, and they gave her sandwiches and treated her well. And it's like, that was the worst thing that could happen to her.
They kidnapped her. They kidnapped her.
Yeah, they put
she
her
was
in
a hostage.
El Al. They put her in El Al
airplane.
Right. They paid for her ticket.
Right. Right.
They treated her
but that's not the narrative that you
No,
want.
I wonder if she saw how Hamas kidnapped a few Jewish women back in.
Listen, she could care less.
Yeah,
I don't think they had a smile
got
on
your
their face.
goal.
Nor were they given a sandwich.
Yeah,
but look at our politicians, and both sides do it. I mean, I'll sit and watch. I watch Fox News more than I watch CNN or whatever. But there's times I'm watching Fox News, going, "Come on, man."
Where it even
if
seems
this
a
was
little
happening
biased.
on the other side, you would be all over it.
I'm on your side. But
Yeah, but now you're kind of pushing it a little bit. This is crazy. But no, and you clearly see it, and I it bothers me because I tell how many times I tell my kids, it used to not be like this. It used to be,
They will never know that.
No, they won't. That's the sad thing. Our kids.
All right.
Well,
This
guys,
has been good.
Yeah, I feel like we need to maybe do this once a month.
Hey, we can do it.
But okay, so the event for the Ambassadors for Israel is called Voices for Truth, Sunday, June 22nd, 4 o'clock to 6:30. We're going to put the information on the screen. There are still some tickets left, but it's limited, and it's www.ambf, like Frank, II.org.
I'm sure you'll put the QR code on the screen, right?
The QR code.
Yeah.
High tech.
I'm in marketing, Jay.
I like that.
That's right.
There is a QR code. So so tickets are $15. They're limited. Get them. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't tell y'all how much we appreciate y'all.
Oh, well, we appreciate you
Absolutely.
inviting us and having us. And
Yes, thank you so much. And I hope you guys join us on the day
Yes.
because
I'll be there.
I think
Yes.
those voices are very important for everybody
I
to
agree.
hear.
Agree 100%.
You know? And we'll have other things as a surprise. So.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We'll see y'all next
Thank you.
time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.